The rich aroma of garlic and basil wrapped around me like my nana's embrace as I stood in the kitchen of Wright's, the restaurant that had been my family's heart and soul for 3 generations. My fingers traced the worn edges of her handwritten recipe book, the pages yellowed but still holding the secrets to the dishes that had made us famous in downtown Seattle. I'm Bianca, and until yesterday, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged. Your grandmother would be proud of how you've kept this place running, Shane, our head chef, said as he chopped herbs with practiced precision. 2 years since she passed, and the restaurant's doing better than ever. I smiled, though my stomach churned with the weight of the conversation I'd had with my husband Daryl the night before. Thanks, Shane. I just wish. The kitchen door burst open. My sister Alexandra rushed in, her face flushed. Bianca, you need to see this, now. I followed her to the office, where she thrust a paper into my hands. My eyes scanned the document, but the words didn't make sense at first. Property transfer? Sale agreement? Closing date? This can't be right, I whispered, my hands shaking. I only signed papers to transfer ownership within our family corporation yesterday. Daryl said it was for tax purposes. Well, your darling husband lied, Alexandra spat. He's sold rights to some developer. They're planning to tear it down for a parking structure. The room spun. I grabbed the desk to steady myself, my grandmother's voice echoing in my memory. Tesoro, trust is earned in drops, but lost in buckets. I pulled out my phone, dialing Daryl's number, straight to voicemail. Again and again. He's been in meetings all morning, Timothy, his business partner, told me when I called his office. Bianca, I thought you knew about the sale. He said you agreed it was necessary to save the tech startup. I hung up, bile rising in my throat. The startup. Of course, his precious company that had been hemorrhaging money for months. I'd supported him, believed in him, even when he came home at midnight smelling of whiskey and failure. I'll kill him, Alexandra declared, pacing the office. I'll actually kill him. Get in line, I muttered, pulling up my banking app. The restaurant's accounts were already locked. In less than 24 hours, my husband had managed to strip away everything my family had built. Shane appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Boss, there are some men here. They say they're from the new ownership group. I straightened my spine, channeling every ounce of my grandmother's strength. Tell them I'll be right out. What are you going to do? Alexandra asked. I'm going to face them, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Then I'm going to find my husband and remind him exactly who he married. The men in suits were waiting in the dining room, looking out of place among the checkered tablecloths and family photos. The leader stepped forward, extending his hand. Mrs. Evans, I'm Robert from Cascade Development. We're here to begin the preliminary assessment. I ignored his hand. This is my family's restaurant. There's been a mistake. He pulled out a folder. No mistake, ma'am. The sale was finalized this morning. Your husband's signature is right here, along with yours. My signature. On papers I'd trusted my husband to explain truthfully. Papers I'd signed while he kissed my neck and whispered about our future. Get out, I said quietly. Mrs. Evans, get out. My voice carried across the restaurant, causing several lunch customers to look up from their plates. My lawyer will be contacting you. Until then, this property is still in dispute. After they left, I sank into a chair, my grandmother's photo watching me from the wall. Her eyes seemed to hold both sympathy and disappointment. What do we do now? Alexandra asked, sitting beside me. My phone buzzed with a text from Daryl. It was the only way to save the company. You'll understand soon. I love you. I deleted the message without responding. Now we fight back. Nona didn't build this place by giving up when things got hard. But how? He's got all the legal documents. A customer at the bar caught my attention. A elegant woman in her 40s, watching me with interest over her glass of wine. She'd been coming in regularly for weeks, always sitting in the same spot, always ordering the same Barolo. First, I said, standing up, I'm going to have a conversation with Ellen Acosta. Something tells me she might be interested in hearing about my husband's business practices. Alexandra's eyes widened. Elena Costa, the venture capitalist? I nodded, straightening my apron. Daryl thinks he can take everything from me? Fine. But he's about to learn what happens when you underestimate a right woman. The woman at the bar raised her glass slightly, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Sometimes revenge, like the best recipes, just needs the right ingredients. I found Daryl in his downtown office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and illuminated by multiple monitors displaying plummeting stock charts. He didn't look up when I entered, just kept typing frantically. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Or were you planning to wait until the bulldozers showed up? He finally looked at me, dark circles under his eyes. Bianca, please, you have to understand. Understand what? I slammed my hands on his desk. That you forged my signature? That you sold my family's legacy to save your failing company? I didn't forge anything. You signed those papers yourself. Under false pretenses, you told me it was a tax document. Daryl stood up, running his hands through his disheveled hair. The company was about to go under. We needed capital immediately. The restaurant was our only asset with enough value. Our? I laughed bitterly. That restaurant was never yours. My grandmother built it from nothing. She worked 18-hour days, saved every penny, created something real. While you're destroying people's lives chasing some tech fantasy. It's not a fantasy. He grabbed my shoulders. We're on the verge of a breakthrough. Once our new software launches, I shrugged him off. Don't touch me. You've lost that right. A knock interrupted us. Timothy stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Sorry, but the investors are waiting in the conference room. Tell them 5 minutes, Daryl said, not taking his eyes off me. Actually, Timothy shifted awkwardly. Ellen Acosta is with them. She's not happy about the delays. Daryl's face paled. Shit. Bianca, we'll talk about this later. No, we won't. I pulled off my wedding ring and placed it on his desk. There's nothing left to talk about. Don't do this, he pleaded. Everything I did for us. For us? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You know what today is, Daryl? It's the anniversary of Nana's death. I was going to cook her signature dish tonight, invite the whole family. Instead, I spent the morning watching strange men measure my restaurant for demolition. His eyes widened in recognition, then guilt. He'd forgotten, of course. Daryl, Timothy called again, more urgently. They're getting impatient. I turned to leave, but Daryl caught my wrist. Wait, just let me explain everything tonight. Please. I yanked my arm free. You know what Nonna used to say? In business and in love, trust is everything. Guess you failed at both. Walking through the office, I passed the conference room. Through the glass walls, I saw Elena Costa sitting at the head of the table, radiating authority in her tailored suit. Our eyes met briefly, and I swear I saw a flicker of recognition. Alexandra was waiting in my car outside. How did it go? About as well as expected. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He tried to justify it, said it was for us. Bastard. She pulled out her phone. I've been doing some digging. His company's in worse shape than we thought. They've missed their last 2 payrolls. Really? I started the car. That's interesting, considering he just sold my restaurant for $3 million. $3 million? Alexandra whistled. Where's all that money going? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Shane. The development guys are back. They're taking inventory of the kitchen equipment. They're what? I slammed on the brakes, earning angry honks from behind. They can't do that yet. The sale isn't final for 30 days. Actually, Alexandra scrolled through the documents on her phone. According to this, they can start preliminary work immediately. Daryl gave them authorization. I pulled over, fighting back tears of rage. He's really thought of everything, hasn't he? Not everything. Alexandra showed me her screen. Look who just followed you on Instagram. Elena Costa herself. I stared at the notification. Why would she remember what Timothy said about her being unhappy with Daryl's company? Alexandra's eyes sparkled. Maybe she's looking for allies. My phone buzzed again, this time with a direct message from Elena. That was quite an exit you made. Perhaps we should discuss our mutual acquaintance over dinner? Alexandra read over my shoulder and grinned. Oh, this is getting good. I thought about Daryl's face when Timothy mentioned Elena's name, the fear in his eyes. You know what? Maybe it is. What are you thinking? I typed a response to Elena. I know a great Italian place. Well, I used to. Her reply came instantly. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., the Metropolitan Grill. We'll discuss how to properly handle men who underestimate women in business. I smiled for the first time that day. Alexandra, call Shane. Tell him to hold on to Nona's recipe book. Something tells me we're going to need it soon. Now that, my sister said, sounds like a recipe for revenge. The Metropolitan Grill hummed with power dinners and deal-making conversations. Elena sat at a corner table, commanding attention without effort. She stood as I approached, greeting me with a firm handshake and appraising eyes. You're exactly as I imagined, she said, gesturing for me to sit. A woman who knows her worth. Funny, I replied, smoothing my dress. I don't feel very worthy right now. That's exactly what men like your husband count on. Elena signaled the waiter. Bottle of Barolo, please, the same one I enjoyed at Wright's. My throat tightened at the name. You were a regular. Every Thursday for the past 2 months. She leaned forward. I make it a point to know my investments thoroughly, including their vulnerabilities. Investments? Your husband's company. Elena's lips curved into a sharp smile. Though I'm starting to think I backed the wrong Wright. The waiter returned with the wine, and Elena waited until he'd poured and left before continuing. Do you know why I invested in your husband's startup? I shook my head. Because you convinced me to. She held up a hand as I started to protest. Not directly, but I watched you transform that restaurant, double the revenue in 2 years, modernize the operations while keeping the soul intact. I thought, if this woman believes in him enough to marry him, he must have something special. I was wrong about him, I said quietly. No, I was wrong about him. You were just loyal. Elena took a sip of wine. Tell me, what would you do if you had the resources to start over? The answer came without hesitation. I'd open a new restaurant. Not just any restaurant, but one that honors everything Nona taught me while being completely my own. And if that restaurant happened to be directly across from your husband's office, I nearly choked on my wine. What? Elena pulled out her tablet, showing me a real estate listing. The old bank building, prime location, historical architecture, and coincidentally, for sale. It would make quite a statement, don't you think? That would be impossible. The startup costs alone are nothing to someone with the right backing. Elena set down her glass. Here's what your husband doesn't know. I'm pulling my investment from his company. His software is derivative, his leadership is weak, and now I know he's willing to commit fraud to save himself. My heart raced. The transfer documents were clearly signed under false pretenses. My lawyers are already building a case. She paused. But legal battles are tedious. I prefer more creative solutions. Why would you help me? Because I'm tired of men like Daryl thinking they can play games with people's lives. Because I believe in backing winners. She smiled. And because the food at Wright's was exceptional. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Shane. They're packing up Nana's old pizza oven, the one she brought from Italy. Said it's going to salvage. My hands shook with anger. Elena noticed. They're dismantling your restaurant piece by piece, aren't they? I nodded, unable to speak. Let me tell you something about revenge, Bianca. The best kind isn't loud or destructive, it's successful. It's building something so magnificent that your enemies are forced to watch you thrive. And that's what you're offering? A chance to thrive? I'm offering partnership. My capital, your expertise. She pulled out a business card. Plus, I know a certain talented chef who's about to be out of a job. Shane would follow me anywhere, I said, thinking of his loyalty over the years. Then let's give him somewhere worth going. Elena raised her glass. To new beginnings? I hesitated, Nana's voice in my head warning about deals made in anger. But then I remembered her other lessons about standing up for yourself, about not letting anyone dim your light. Wait, I said, I have conditions. First, the restaurant stays true to my family's values. No cutting corners on quality. Naturally. Second, I want to hire back as many of my old staff as possible. They're family. Done. And third, I took a deep breath. I want to name it Maria's. Elena's eyebrows rose. After your grandmother? She taught me everything I know about food, about business, about life. I felt tears threatening but held them back. Daryl may have taken rights, but he can't take her legacy. Maria's it is. Elena pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. I took the liberty of having my lawyers draw up preliminary partnership papers. Take them home. Review them carefully. Unlike some people, I believe in full transparency. As I reached for the folder, my wedding ring-free hand steady and sure, Elena added, Oh, and Bianca, the space has excellent windows, perfect for your husband to watch his wife succeed while his company crumbles. I left the restaurant that night with a folder full of possibilities and a fire in my heart. Revenge, it turned out, could taste as sweet as Nona's tiramisu. The acoustics in here are incredible, Alexandra said, her voice echoing through the empty bank building. Can't you just hear the dinner rush already? I stood in the center of the vast space, imagining tables filled with happy diners, the warmth of conversation mixing with the scents from the kitchen. The morning light streamed through the towering windows, illuminating the intricate crown molding and marble columns. Over here, Shane called from near the back wall. This is where we'll put the wood-fired oven. The ventilation's perfect. Elena walked in, heels clicking on the hardwood floors. The contractor can start tomorrow. We'll need to move quickly if we want to open in 3 months. 3 months? I spun around. That's impossible. Impossible is what people say when they lack motivation. Elena handed me a stack of permits. These were just approved. Amazing how quickly bureaucracy moves when you know the right people. Shane joined us, practically bouncing with excitement. I've been calling the old crew. Everyone wants in. Even Marco's willing to leave his cushy hotel job to come back. Really? Marco had been Nona's right hand for 15 years before Wright's was sold. But he always said corporate benefits were nothing compared to family. A familiar voice boomed from the entrance. Marco stood there, his chef's coat slung over his shoulder. You think I'd miss this? I ran to hug him, breathing in the familiar scent of garlic and herbs that seemed to permanently cling to him. But how did you know? Word travels fast in restaurant circles. He grinned, especially when Elena Costa is involved. Elena cleared her throat. Speaking of involvement, there's something you should see. She pulled up an article on her tablet. Your husband's company just missed another payroll. Alexandra peered over my shoulder at the screen. Look at the comments. Their employees are furious. Their lead developer quit this morning, Elena added. Apparently, he didn't appreciate having his salary paid in empty promises. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead, a wave of sadness hit me. All those people losing their jobs? Don't, Elena said sharply. Don't waste sympathy on Daryl's mess. Focus on the people you can help, your team, your family. Marco clapped his hands. Speaking of team, let me show you my ideas for the kitchen layout. We spent the next hour planning spaces, arguing over equipment placement, and dreaming up possibilities. Shane and Marco debated the merits of different ranges, while Alexandra sketched table arrangements on her iPad. We'll need to modernize some of Nana's recipes, Shane said carefully, watching my reaction. Not change them, just adapt them for a higher volume kitchen. Nana would understand, Marco assured me. She always said tradition should guide us, not chain us. A commotion at the door interrupted our planning. Timothy stood there, looking uncomfortable. Bianca, he said, stepping forward, can we talk? Elena moved to intervene, but I held up a hand. It's okay. 5 minutes, Timothy. We walked to a quiet corner while the others pretended not to listen. Daryl's a mess, Timothy said without preamble. He knows he screwed up. The company's imploding, and now with Elena pulling out. Did he send you? No, he doesn't know I'm here. Timothy ran a hand through his hair. Look, I feel partially responsible. I should have said something when he first proposed selling rights. Why didn't you? Because I believed in him, in the company. He laughed bitterly. Pretty stupid, huh? Not stupid, loyal. I touched his arm. Like I was. The difference is, your loyalty was to something real. He glanced around the space. This is real too, isn't it? I nodded. It will be. Good. He handed me a USB drive. Here's everything. Financials, emails, the real numbers behind the company. Use it however you want. Timothy. He's my friend, but what he did to you was wrong. He started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Bianca? The software he's betting everything on? It doesn't work. Never did. The demos were all smoke and mirrors. After he left, Elena appeared at my side. Well, that was unexpected. What do I do with this? I held up the drive. Nothing for now. She smiled wickedly. Sometimes the best revenge is letting your enemies destroy themselves while you build something beautiful. I walked back to the group where Shane and Marco were still arguing about kitchen equipment. Okay, I announced. Let's talk about the pizza oven. Already ordered, Elena said. The exact model from your grandmother's restaurant. It'll be here next week. I stared at her. How did you? I told you, I do my research. She checked her watch. Now, we have a meeting with the interior designer in 20 minutes. I'm thinking we showcase local artists, really emphasize community connections. As everyone gathered their things, I took one last look around the space. Through the windows, I could see Daryl's office building looming across the street. Soon, he'd have a perfect view of everything he'd lost. Ready? Alexandra asked, linking her arm through mine. Ready, I replied, turning my back on the view. It was time to create something new. Opening night at Maria's felt like a dream. The renovated bank building glowed with warmth, its windows casting golden light onto the street. A line stretched around the block, and I recognized faces from Wrights mixed with curious newcomers. They're here for you, Alexandra whispered, adjusting my chef's coat. Not just the food, they're here because they believe in you. The dining room buzzed with energy. Every table was filled, and the bar area overflowed with people waiting to be seated. Marco and Shane orchestrated the kitchen like conductors, calling orders and directing traffic with practiced ease. Table 7 wants to meet the owner, our hostess said, approaching with a nervous smile. It's some food critics from the Seattle Times. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked to their table. The critics were mid-bite when I arrived, their expressions rapturous. "This carbonara," the lead critic said, "it's exactly like what I had at Wright's, but somehow better." "My grandmother's recipe," I explained, with a few modern touches. "And the space," he gestured around, "the way you've honored the building's history while creating something entirely new. Brilliant." A commotion near the entrance drew my attention. Daryl stood in the doorway, looking disheveled and angry. Elena materialized beside me instantly. "I'll handle this," she said, but I shook my head. "No, it's time I did." I approached my soon-to-be ex-husband, noting his untucked shirt and wild eyes. "You can't be here, Daryl." "Can't be here?" He laughed too loudly. "My wife opens a restaurant across from my office, and I can't be here?" "Ex-wife," I corrected quietly. "The papers were served last week." "This is what you do?" He gestured around frantically. "Take my investor, steal my employees." "Your employees?" I cut him off. "You mean the ones you haven't paid in 6 weeks? The ones who had to take second jobs to make rent?" Several nearby diners were watching now, phones discreetly recording. "You're trying to destroy me," he accused. "No, Daryl, you did that yourself." I kept my voice steady. "Now, please leave before I call security." "You think you're so clever?" He stepped closer, breath sour with alcohol. "You and Elena, plotting behind my back? I built a tech company from nothing." "You built lies," I replied. "I built this." I gestured to the packed restaurant. Real food, real people, real success. Not smoke and mirrors and empty promises. "How dare you?" Marco and Shane appeared on either side of me, arms crossed. Timothy emerged from the crowd, placing a hand on Daryl's shoulder. "Come on, man," Timothy said gently. "Don't do this." "You too?" Daryl shrugged him off. "You're all against me?" "No one's against you," I said. "We're just not under your spell anymore." Elena stepped forward, phone in hand. "Leave now, or I release the contents of that USB drive to every tech blog in Seattle." Daryl's face went pale. He looked around at the crowd of witnesses, at the former employees now working in my restaurant, at the success he couldn't touch. Without another word, he turned and stumbled out. Timothy lingered. "I'm sorry about that. I'll make sure he gets home safely." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. As the excitement died down, Elena raised an eyebrow. "Well handled." "I learned from the best." I smiled. "Both you and Nonna." The rest of the night flew by in a blur of happy customers and empty plates. Near closing, Shane brought out a special dish. Nonna's signature tiramisu, made exactly as she taught me. To Maria's, Elena raised her glass, surrounded by our staff. And to the woman who inspired it all. "To Nonna," everyone echoed. I looked around at my new family, the staff who'd followed me, the sister who'd supported me, the mentor who'd believed in me. Through the windows, I could see Daryl's dark office building, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd gained. Alexandra hugged me from behind. "Nonna would be so proud." "You think so?" "Are you kidding?" Marco called from the kitchen. "She's probably up there bragging to all the other angels about her granddaughter right now." As the staff cleaned up, sharing jokes and stories, I slipped into the kitchen. The pizza oven, the same one from Wright's, glowed with dying embers. I placed my hand on its warm surface, remembering countless nights watching Nonna work her magic here. "You were right," I whispered to her memory. "Success is the best revenge." "Chef," Shane called. "The staff wants to know if we can pop some champagne to celebrate." I looked at our sales numbers for the night, at the stack of positive comment cards, at the happy faces of my team. Bring out the good stuff, I called back. Tonight, we celebrate everything. Through the kitchen window, I watched my family, old and new, gathering in the dining room, and I finally felt complete. Nonna had built rights from nothing. Now I'd built Maria's from everything she taught me, and that was worth more than any revenge. Another 5-star review, Alexandra announced, sliding her tablet across my desk. They're calling Maria's the best Italian restaurant in Seattle. I should have been ecstatic, but Elena's earlier words still echoed in my head. She wanted to franchise, to expand, to turn Maria's into a chain. Think bigger, she'd said. Why stop at one success when you could have an empire? A knock interrupted my thoughts. Shane poked his head in. We've got a situation. I followed him to the dining room where Marco stood arguing with a health inspector. This is harassment, Marco insisted. We just passed inspection last week. The inspector, a thin man with a clipboard, smiled thinly. We received an anonymous complaint. Let me guess, I said, stepping forward. About our ventilation system? He consulted his clipboard. Among other things. The same ventilation system that passed 3 inspections this month? I pulled out my phone. Should I call the department head? I'm sure she'd love to hear about these repeated anonymous complaints. The inspector's smile faltered. That won't be necessary. After he left, Marco slammed his hand on the counter. Daryl, it has to be. Of course it's Daryl, Shane agreed. He's been sending his cronies in every night, trying to find something wrong. I rubbed my temples. How's his company doing? Not good, Alexandra said, reading from her phone. Stock's down 80% since the scandal broke. Most of the staff jumped ship to their competitors. Chef, one of our servers rushed in. You need to see this. She led us to table 12 where Elena sat across from a familiar face, Timothy. Their conversation looked intense. I should go over there, I said, but Shane grabbed my arm. Wait, look. Timothy handed Elena a thick folder. She opened it, nodded, then slid an envelope across the table. They shook hands, and Timothy walked toward us. Bianca, he said, looking nervous, can we talk? In my office, Timothy paced while I waited. Daryl's lost it, he finally said. He's talking about lawsuits, about destroying Maria's reputation. He's obsessed. The health inspections? Just the beginning. He's hired people to post fake reviews, to call the liquor board, even to try bribing your staff for dirt. I leaned back. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm done. He sat heavily. I just sold my shares to Elena. I'm out. Timothy? He was my best friend, he continued, but I don't recognize him anymore. The lies, the manipulation, it's not just business anymore. It's personal. A knock interrupted us. Elena entered, holding the folder Timothy had given her. You should see this, she said, spreading documents across my desk. Proof of every illegal thing Daryl's done in the past year, including the fraudulent transfer of rights. My hands shook as I read. This is enough to bury him? Elena's smile was sharp. Yes. The question is, do you want to? I looked at Timothy. Why now? Because of this. He pulled out his phone, showing me a text from Daryl. Time to destroy the bitch who ruined everything. He sent that this morning, Timothy said. After drinking all night, he's planning something big. As if on cue, Alexandra burst in. Turn on the news, now. I grabbed the remote, flipping to the local station. Daryl stood at a podium, looking surprisingly put together. And it saddens me to announce that my wife's new restaurant, Maria's, has been built on stolen proprietary information and fraudulent finances. He's lying, Marco shouted from the doorway. We'll be filing charges, Daryl continued. Elena calmly pulled out her phone. Time to end this. Wait, I said. watching my husband, this stranger, try to destroy everything I'd built. I have a better idea. I turned to Timothy. Those documents prove the rights transfer was fraudulent, right? He nodded. Elena, how quickly can your lawyers move? She smiled, understanding. Very quickly. Good. I picked up my phone. Because I'm not just going to defend Maria's, I'm going to take back rights. Alexandra gasped. Can you do that? With these documents? Elena examined the papers. Absolutely. The sale would be void. Everything would revert to Bianca. Do it, I said, watching Daryl continue his speech. But first, call every food critic, blogger, and journalist who's reviewed Maria's. Tell them to be here tonight. What are you planning? Shane asked. I thought of Nana, of her belief in facing challenges head on. I'm going to tell my story, all of it. Let Seattle decide who to believe, the failed tech CEO or the woman who's feeding them their grandmother's recipes. Elena was already dialing. I love it. Transparency as revenge. Not revenge, I corrected. Justice. For rights. For Nona. For everyone he's hurt. As my team sprang into action, I watched Daryl on screen, seeing him clearly for the first time. He wasn't the man I'd loved. He was just another bully who thought he could take what wasn't his. Well, not anymore. Tonight, I'd remind Seattle what real authenticity tastes like. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'd take back everything he stole. The press conference was set for 7 p.m. prime dinner hour. Every table at Maria's was filled with journalists, food critics, and loyal customers. Camera crews set up their equipment while Shane and Marco worked magic in the kitchen. Ready? Alexandra squeezed my hand. Before I could answer, the front door burst open. Daryl stormed in, followed by 2 men in suits. You can't do this, he shouted. I have an injunction. No, you don't. Elena stepped forward, waving a document. Judge denied it 20 minutes ago. Would you like to see the ruling? The room fell silent, dozens of cameras turning to capture the scene. You're making a mistake, Daryl said, his voice dropping. Bianca, please, we can talk about this privately. Like how we talked about selling rights? I moved to the podium we'd set up. No more private conversations, Daryl. No more secrets. He grabbed my arm. Don't do this. Marco and Shane started forward, but Elena held up a hand. This was my battle. I pulled free of Daryl's grip. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bianca, and I have a story to tell you about 2 restaurants and one very important lesson my grandmother taught me. The cameras rolled as I recounted everything. Growing up in Wright's kitchen, Nana's legacy, the fraudulent transfer, and the birth of Maria's. With each word, Daryl seemed to shrink. But this isn't just my story, I continued. It's about every small business owner who's been deceived, every family legacy threatened by corporate greed, every person who's ever been told their dreams are worth less than someone else's ambitions. Elena stepped forward, handling the technical details, the legal documents, the proof of fraud, the timeline of deception. Timothy provided supporting evidence, his testimony damning and precise. You're ruining everything, Daryl interrupted, his voice cracking. The company is already ruined, Timothy said quietly. It was never real, Daryl. The software doesn't work. It never did. That's a lie, Daryl lunged at Timothy. Security intercepted him as cameras flashed. The suited men who'd arrived with him quietly slipped away. Mr. Evans, a reporter called out, how do you respond to allegations that you defrauded investors? Another joined in. Is it true your company falsified demo results? Daryl's face contorted. This is all her fault. She's trying to destroy me because she's jealous of my success. Success? I laughed, genuinely amused. Let's talk about success. I gestured to the packed restaurant. Every person here has eaten both at Wright's and Maria's. They know authentic when they taste it. They understand the difference between real value and empty promises. You think you're so special, Daryl sneered. With your family recipes and your loyal customers, I built something innovative. No, Elena stepped in. You built a house of cards. Bianca built a home. As if on cue, Marco emerged from the kitchen carrying Nana's signature dishes, the recipes that had fed generations. The familiar aroma filled the room, and I watched Daryl's face as he recognized the scents from our early dating days. You used to love these dishes, I said softly. You used to understand what they meant. Something broke in his expression. I just wanted to be successful, he whispered. Like you, like your grandmother. But you didn't want to work for it, I replied. You wanted shortcuts. Elena cleared her throat. The papers are ready. Full restoration of Wright's ownership to Bianca in exchange for dropping all potential criminal charges. Daryl stared at the documents, then at the room full of witnesses. His shoulders slumped. It's over, isn't it? It's been over, I said. You just couldn't see it. He signed without reading, then walked out without another word. The reporters erupted with questions, but Elena handled them smoothly while I slipped into the kitchen. Alexandra found me there, staring at Nana's old pizza oven, the one we'd managed to save. You did it, she said, hugging me tight. You got Wright's back. We did it, I corrected, looking at my team, my family, all of us. Shane appeared with a bottle of champagne. So, Chef, what's next? Running 2 restaurants is gonna be 3, Elena interrupted, entering the kitchen. The building next to Wright's just came on the market. Perfect for a cooking school, don't you think? Teaching the next generation Nana's lessons about food, family, and integrity. I looked around at these people who'd stood by me, who'd believed in something real. Nana always said a good meal brings people together, but a great restaurant builds community. To community, Marco raised a glass. To family, Alexandra added. To justice, Elena smiled. To Nona, I finished, feeling her presence in every corner of the kitchen. Outside, I could hear the journalists sharing their meals, exclaiming over the food, understanding finally that success isn't about winning or revenge. It's about creating something authentic and sharing it with the world. Wright's would reopen, Maria's would thrive, and somewhere I knew Nonna was smiling. The aroma of fresh herbs and baking bread filled both kitchens as I walked the connecting pathway between Wright's and Maria's. Each restaurant hummed with its own unique energy, Wright's comfortable and traditional, Maria's modern and vibrant. Together, they told my family's story. Chef, Shane called from Wright's kitchen. The students are here for their final exam. In the teaching kitchen between the restaurants, 12 aspiring chefs stood at their stations, nervous energy radiating from their pressed whites. Alexandra moved between them, checking their setup. Today, I announced, you'll create 2 dishes, one from Wright's traditional menu and one modern interpretation for Maria's. Show us what you've learned about respecting tradition while embracing innovation. Elena slipped in quietly, taking her usual seat at the judges' table. Marco joined her, along with 3 other respected Seattle chefs. Begin, Alexandra called, and the kitchen erupted into controlled chaos. As the students worked, Timothy appeared at my side. Thought you'd want to know, Daryl took a job in Portland, entry-level programming position. How's he doing? Better, actually. Says he's learning to code properly this time. No shortcuts. A crash from Station 3 interrupted us. One of our students, Sarah, stood frozen as her saucepan dripped onto the floor. Deep breath, I said, approaching her station. What would Nona do? Sarah closed her eyes, centering herself. Start fresh, but there's only 20 minutes left. Then we better work fast. I grabbed a clean pan. Show me what you remember about building flavors. As we worked, I caught Elena smiling. She'd been right about the cooking school. Teaching others helped heal something in me I hadn't realized was broken. The final presentations proved impressive. Sarah's recovered sauce earned particular praise, her modern twist on Nana's recipe showing real understanding of both tradition and innovation. Before we announce the results, I said, I want to share something my grandmother told me when I was learning to cook. She said, in the kitchen, like in life, we must learn to balance holding on and letting go. The students nodded, understanding flowing deeper than just cooking. Speaking of balance, Elena stood up. I have an announcement. The investment group has approved expansion plans. 3 more Maria's locations, each paired with a cooking school. The room erupted in excited chatter, but Elena held up her hand. Each location will be run by someone who understands both the tradition of rights and the innovation of Maria's, someone who's completed this program. Sarah's eyes widened as understanding spread through the room. This wasn't just a cooking class. It was an opportunity to become part of something bigger. Later that evening, both restaurants were packed. I moved between them, watching my 2 families work in harmony. At Wright's, Marco taught a young server about the history behind each dish. At Maria's, Shane experimented with new techniques while keeping Nona's principles intact. Alexandra found me in the connecting pathway. Look what I found in the old Wright's office. She handed me a worn envelope. Inside was a letter from Nona, dated just before she passed. My dearest Bianca, by the time you read this, Wright's will be yours. But remember, a restaurant is more than walls and recipes. It's a place where life happens, where lessons are learned, love is shared, and sometimes hearts are broken. But from every breaking comes new growth. Don't be afraid to grow, my darling. Don't be afraid to change. Just keep the important things, love, family, authenticity, at the heart of everything you do. With all my love, Nona. She knew, I whispered. She knew I'd need to hear this someday. She always knew, Alexandra smiled. Come on, the dinner rush is starting. In the Wright's dining room, I passed the table where Daryl and I had our first date. At Maria's, I saw the spot where Elena first proposed her plan for revenge that became something more like redemption. The cooking school students were helping in both kitchens tonight, learning to navigate between tradition and innovation. Sarah caught my eye and grinned, her confidence growing with every dish. Elena appeared with 2 glasses of Barolo. To balance? To growth, I countered, thinking of Nonna's letter. Through the windows, I could see the lights of Seattle spreading out before us. Somewhere out there, Daryl was starting over, learning his own lessons about authenticity and hard work. I hoped he'd find his way. But here, in this space between 2 restaurants, between past and future, I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found purpose. Chef, called voices from both kitchens. We need you. I handed my glass to Alexandra. Duty calls. Always does, she laughed. I headed toward the voices, ready to teach, to learn, to grow. Nonna was right. From every breaking comes new growth. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so beautiful that it transforms not just your life, but the lives of everyone it touches. That's what Nonna did with Wright's. That's what I was doing with Maria's. And that's what we'd keep doing. One dish, one student, one lesson at a time.
I never expected that at 66 years old, I'd lose my hearing completely. But that's exactly what happened to me 4 months ago after getting a really bad infection. I'm Mina, and this whole mess started when I woke up one morning in the hospital, unable to hear a single thing. It wasn't like I had a lot of people to talk to anyway. My daughter Lucy and I hadn't spoken in years, not since her father, my husband, passed away. That whole situation still makes my blood boil when I think about it. Lucy showed up at my house just days after the funeral, demanding that I sell our family home and give her half of everything her father had left behind. I remember staring at her, shocked that she could be so cold about it. "Lucy," I told her, "your father left everything to me in his will. You'll get it all anyway when I'm gone, you're my only child. Why are you in such a hurry?" She didn't like that answer one bit. "That's not fair," she yelled. "I have my own family to think about. I can't just sit around waiting for you to die." Those were the last words we exchanged before she stormed out. After that, we lived completely separate lives, her with her husband Mike and their kids in some rental house across town, me alone in the big house where I'd lived with her father for over 40 years. Then came the infection that took my hearing. I was lying in that hospital bed, feeling more alone than ever, when Lucy suddenly showed up in my room. She had a notepad with her, and I watched as she wrote something down and held it up for me to read. "Mom, you need someone to take care of you now. Let me help, please." Maybe it was the medication, or maybe it was just being tired of being alone, but I found myself nodding. Before I knew it, I invited her and her whole family to come live with me. Lucy, Mike, their 18-year-old daughter Drew, and 14-year-old Tom, they all moved out of their rental place and into my big country house. I even gave Lucy access to my bank account so she could handle all the bills and shopping, not just for me but for all of them. I figured it would be easier that way, since I couldn't hear anything anymore and going to stores or dealing with payment stuff had become a real challenge. The first few weeks of living together were strange, but Lucy really did stick to her word about taking care of me. Every morning, she'd go grocery shopping, making sure to get everything we needed. She'd cook 3 meals a day, clean the house from top to bottom, and never complained when I needed to go to yet another doctor's appointment. Those appointments became a regular part of our routine. Lucy would drive me to the clinic, wait with me in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, and help me communicate with the doctors. We'd gotten into a system where everyone wrote things down for me on notepads or their phones, and I'd respond by talking, probably too loudly, but nobody seemed to mind. I remember one particular appointment that changed everything. The doctor had been running all sorts of tests, and I was hopeful they'd finally have some good news. Instead, he wrote on his notepad, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker, but a hearing aid won't help in your case. We need to keep investigating the root cause of your deafness before we can work on restoring your hearing." I must have stared at that note for 5 solid minutes. Lucy had to tap my shoulder to get my attention, probably worried about how still I'd become. But what could I say? It felt like someone had just slammed a door in my face. Back at home, we settled into our new way of communicating. The family would write notes to me about everything, what they wanted for dinner, when they were going out, if someone had called. I'd respond by talking, making sure to speak up so they could hear me clearly. It wasn't perfect, but we made it work. My granddaughter Drew turned out to be a real blessing during this time. She noticed how bored I was getting and showed up in my room one day with her tablet. "Grandma," she wrote, "let me show you some cool apps I think you'll like." She spent hours teaching me how to use different programs, showing me how to download books, play games, and even watch movies with subtitles. I had to quit my job at the college, which was harder than I expected. I'd been teaching literature there for years, not because I needed the money. Thomas had left me more than comfortable with his inheritance, but because I loved it. Standing in front of those students, discussing great works of literature, watching their faces light up when they finally understood a complex passage, that was what got me out of bed in the morning. But you can't teach when you can't hear your students. I tried to convince myself I could make it work somehow, but deep down, I knew it was impossible. How could I lead discussions? How could I answer questions? How could I know if a student was struggling if I couldn't hear them trying to get my attention? So now my days are different. I spend most of my time reading books, both physical ones and ebooks on the tablet Drew gave me. I've discovered that the internet is a pretty amazing place when you have nothing but time on your hands. I've found websites about everything you can imagine, and I've even joined some online book clubs where everything is written rather than spoken. Living in silence makes you notice things you might have missed before. From my usual spot in the living room armchair, I had a front row seat to my family's daily life, even if I couldn't hear it. Lucy and Mike seemed to be getting along better than ever. I'd watch them in the kitchen during breakfast, heads close together, laughing over their coffee. Lucy would touch Mike's arm while they talked, and he'd smile at her in a way that reminded me of how Thomas used to look at me. Sometimes they'd catch me watching and wave, their faces breaking into warm smiles. The grandkids had settled into their routines too. Drew spent a lot of time in her room, studying or working on her photography projects. Tom was usually glued to his gaming console in the basement, only emerging for meals or when Lucy called him upstairs. It all looked so normal, perfect, even. But then I started noticing other things. Like the time I walked into the kitchen to get some tea, and Lucy and Mike were having what looked like an intense conversation. When they saw me, they both smiled broadly, too broadly, but their eyes met over my head in a way that made me uncomfortable. Or how sometimes, when they thought I wasn't looking, they'd exchange these knowing smirks while glancing in my direction. I tried to shake it off. After all, why would they be mocking me? Lucy was taking such good care of me, cooking my favorite meals, keeping my room spotless, making sure I took all my medications on time. And Mike had been nothing but helpful, fixing things around the house and even installing some new safety features in my bathroom. But those looks, those smiles, they kept nagging at me. The way their expressions would shift when they thought I wasn't watching. The quick glances they'd exchange when I'd ask them to write something down for me. The way their smiles never quite reached their eyes when they were directed at me. Stop it, I'd scold myself. You're just bitter because you can't hear. You're imagining conspiracies because you're frustrated with your situation. They're your family, they love you. Weeks passed like this, with me constantly second-guessing everything I saw. Was that laugh really at my expense? Did that whispered conversation stop because I entered the room? Was I really seeing mockery in their expressions, or was it all in my head? Then came that morning, it must have been around 6 a.m. I was sleeping soundly when something jolted me awake. At first, I was confused, disoriented. Then I realized what had woken me, a car horn blaring loudly from the street outside. I jumped out of bed, already pulling on my robe, ready to go give that inconsiderate driver a piece of my mind. I was halfway to my bedroom door when it hit me, I had heard the horn. I had actually heard it. My hand started shaking as I stood there in the middle of my room. I could hear the early morning birds chirping outside my window. I could hear the hum of the heating system. I could hear the old floorboards creaking under my feet. My hearing was back. After 4 months of nothing but silence, I could hear again. My heart was still racing with excitement as I headed toward the stairs. I couldn't wait to tell everyone about my miracle, that my hearing had returned. But halfway down the staircase, I heard voices coming from the living room. Lucy and Mike were already up, talking in low tones. "I'm so damn tired of this," Mike was saying, his voice dripping with irritation. "How much longer do we have to keep pretending? Pretending to care about your mother. Acting like we're one big happy family. I'm sick of tiptoeing around that old woman. When is she finally going to die?" I froze on the stairs, my hand gripping the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. But what came next was even worse. "Just be patient," Lucy replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "It won't be much longer. I mean, look at her, she's already lost her hearing. That's usually the first sign of overall decline in old people. Once they start losing their faculties, they usually give up pretty quickly. She'll probably just waste away." The world tilted sideways for a moment. I had to sit down on the stairs, my legs too weak to hold me up. My own daughter. My own flesh and blood was sitting down there, calmly discussing my death with her husband. All those suspicious looks I'd noticed. I hadn't been paranoid after all. It took everything I had not to break down right there. I stood up, straightened my robe, and walked down the rest of the stairs. Entering the living room, I made sure to walk heavily. After all, a deaf person wouldn't know to step quietly. I smiled broadly at them and practically shouted, just as I had been doing for the past 4 months. "Good morning. It's such a beautiful day." They jumped a little at my entrance, but quickly recovered. Lucy gave me that sweet, fake smile I now recognized all too well, while Mike nodded enthusiastically. God, how had I not seen through this performance before? That afternoon, I dug out my old phone from the drawer and figured out how to use it as a voice recorder. I wasn't sure what I would do with the recordings yet, but I knew I needed evidence. Every morning after that, I'd slip the phone into the pocket of my house dress and let it record everything. The things I heard over the next few days made me sick to my stomach. It wasn't just Lucy and Mike, even my grandson Tom was in on it. He'd come home from school, look right at me sitting in my chair, and ask loudly, "Hey, is the deaf old lady still alive?" Lucy and Mike would laugh like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. "Yes, son," Mike would say, chuckling. "Unfortunately, she's still kicking." "God, she's so annoying," Tom would complain, rolling his eyes. "Everything has to be written down or gestured. It's infuriating. Can't she just figure things out on her own?" And through it all, they'd smile at me. Sweet, caring smiles. Patient smiles. Loving smiles. They'd write me little notes asking if I needed anything, if I was comfortable, if I wanted a cup of tea. And all the while, they were waiting for me to die. Thank God for Drew. In the middle of all this ugliness, my granddaughter was the only pure thing left in my life. While everyone else in the house was putting on an act, Drew's kindness was real. I could hear it now in her voice, see it in her actions, and feel it in her genuine concern for me. Every few days, she'd knock on my door with a new book tucked under her arm. "Grandma," she'd write in her notebook, "I saw this at the bookstore and thought of you. It's about a woman traveling through Europe in the 1920s. I know you love historical stories." She was right, I did love them. And I loved how she actually paid attention to what I enjoyed, unlike her mother who just pretended to care. Drew would sit with me for hours, showing me her photography projects on her laptop. She had real talent, capturing moments that told entire stories in a single frame. I could hear her voice now when she shared these things with me, full of passion and enthusiasm, but I kept up my act of reading her notes and responding in my too loud voice. It broke my heart a little to pretend with her, the only honest person in this house, but I couldn't risk the others finding out. But what truly touched my heart was how she stood up for me when she thought I couldn't hear. One evening, I was in my room when voices rose from the hallway outside my door. "Mom, you need to stop talking about Grandma like that," Drew was saying, her voice firm. "She deserves better. She's not just some burden we're waiting to get rid of." "Oh, honey, mind your own business," Lucy dismissed her. "Go to your room and stop interfering in things that don't concern you." I heard Drew storm off, her footsteps heavy with teenage indignation. Through my window, I could see her walk to the garden bench where she always went when she was upset. She sat there, wiping tears from her eyes, and I wished I could tell her how proud I was of her, how grateful I was for her defense of me. It was strange how Drew had turned out so different from her mother. Where Lucy was calculating and cold, Drew was warm and genuine. Where Lucy saw me as a burden to be endured, Drew saw me as a person to be cherished. Sometimes I caught myself studying her face, trying to find traces of the kind young woman Lucy had once been, before money and greed had poisoned her heart. Having Drew in my corner made the whole situation a little more bearable. Yes, I was living in a house full of people who were waiting for me to die, but at least I had one ally. One person who saw me as more than just an inconvenience or a source of inheritance. One person who actually cared. It's amazing how people will say anything in front of someone they think can't hear them. I was sitting in my usual spot in the living room, pretending to be absorbed in my book, when Lucy and Mike started talking about money. My money, to be specific. "So how much have you managed to get out so far?" Mike asked casually, as if they were discussing the weather. He was sprawled on the couch, feet up on my coffee table. Lucy was flipping through some papers, probably my bank statements. "About 25,000 so far." I nearly dropped my book, but caught myself just in time. $25,000? They'd stolen $25,000 from me? Mike scoffed. That's it? Come on, Lucy, you need to be more aggressive about this. That old bag has more money than she knows what to do with. She wouldn't even notice if you took twice that amount. I kept my eyes fixed on my book, turning a page slowly, playing my part. Inside, my heart was pounding so hard I was afraid they might hear it. It's not that simple, Lucy said, sounding annoyed. Mom has alerts set up on her account for large withdrawals and transfers. If we go over certain amounts, she'll get notifications. She may be deaf, but unfortunately, she's not blind. We have to be careful. Yeah, Mike sighed heavily. It's really a shame she's not blind too. That would make things so much easier. I had to fight to keep my hands from shaking. My own daughter and her husband, sitting there discussing how convenient it would be if I was not just deaf, but blind as well. I wondered if there was any limit to their cruelty. Later that same day, I was pretending to nap in my chair near the kitchen when I heard them at it again. The recorder in my pocket was catching every word. I noticed you'd been buying those fancy organic steaks, Mike was saying. And that expensive wine. Isn't it too posh for your mother? Lucy laughed, that fake, tinkling laugh she'd perfected over the years. Oh please, I buy all the good stuff for us and get her the cheapest things I can find. Generic brands, marked down meat, whatever's on clearance. She can't taste the difference anyway, she's so grateful just to have someone cooking for her. They both turned to look at me then, and I could feel their eyes on me as I pretended to sleep. They started laughing, not even trying to be quiet about it. After all, why bother being quiet around a deaf woman? Look at her, Lucy snickered. Sleeping like a baby, no idea we're eating filet mignon while she gets discount hamburger. At least she's getting something to eat, Mike chuckled. Better than what she deserves. I kept my breathing steady, my face relaxed, while my stomach churned with disgust. The worst part wasn't even the money. It wasn't the cheap food or the theft or the deception. It was hearing the absolute glee in their voices as they discussed taking advantage of me. They weren't just stealing from me out of desperation or need, they were enjoying it. They were having fun making a fool out of the deaf old lady who had welcomed them into her home. 3 weeks before my birthday, Lucy handed me a note during breakfast. Her handwriting was extra neat, like she'd taken special care with it. Mom, I want to throw you a big birthday party. We'll invite all your friends and relatives. You deserve to be celebrated. I smiled and nodded enthusiastically, shouting my reply as usual, that sounds wonderful, dear. How thoughtful of you. But I knew better now. This wasn't about celebrating me, this was about putting on a show. Lucy wanted witnesses to her devoted daughter act. Maybe she was trying to establish herself as the caring daughter in front of everyone, or maybe she wanted to demonstrate what a burden I was and how nobly she was handling it. The preparations went into full swing. Lucy made dozens of phone calls, which I could now hear perfectly, inviting people and arranging everything. She ordered expensive catering, hired decorators, and even got a professional photographer. Nothing but the best for her dear old mom's birthday. The day of the party arrived, and our house filled with relatives and old friends I hadn't seen in years. Some of them looked uncomfortable writing notes to communicate with me, but they made the effort. All the while, Lucy fluttered around like the perfect hostess, the devoted daughter. Mom has been such an inspiration, she told everyone, her voice thick with fake emotion. Taking care of her isn't a burden at all, it's a privilege. After all she's done for me, this is the least I can do. I sat there in my place of honor, smiling and nodding, playing my role as the grateful deaf mother. Inside, I was counting down the minutes until I could end this charade. Then Tom, my grandson, dimmed the lights and started a slideshow he'd prepared. Photos of our happy family filled the wall, Lucy helping me in the garden, Mike reading to me, something he'd never actually done, Tom and Drew sitting with me on the porch. Each photo was perfectly staged, and each one had sappy captions like "Love knows no bounds" and "Family is forever" superimposed over them. I could hear the ahs and sniffles from the guests as they watched. My cousin Patricia wiped away tears, saying how wonderful it was to see a family so devoted to each other. My old college friend Martha kept patting Lucy's hand, telling her what an amazing daughter she was. The slideshow ended with a photo of all of us together, looking like the perfect loving family, with the words "We love you, Grandma," sparkling across the screen. That was when I decided I'd had enough. I stood up slowly, my recorder still safely tucked in my pocket, containing weeks of evidence of their true nature. The room quieted as everyone turned to look at me, probably expecting some kind of emotional thank you speech. "I have something important to tell all of you," I said, my voice clear and steady. No more shouting, no more exaggerated gestures. I'd been able to hear for the past 6 weeks. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy's face turned the color of sour milk. Mike looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Tom froze with his hand still on the laptop, his mouth hanging open. Before anyone could recover from my announcement, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "And I have proof of everything," I said, pressing play. The room filled with Lucy's voice. "It won't be much longer. That old woman will give up soon enough." Then Mike, "How much have you taken so far?" 25,000? "That's nothing, take more." Tom's cruel joke echoed through the speakers. "Hey, is the deaf old lady still alive?" The recordings went on and on. Every nasty comment, every cruel joke, every conversation about stealing my money, all of it played out in front of our stunned audience. Some of my friends covered their mouths in horror. Others just stared at Lucy and her family with disgust. I turned to my cousin Robert, who'd been a lawyer for 30 years. "Robert, I'd like to retain your services. I want to press charges against my daughter and her husband for elder abuse and financial fraud." Robert stood up immediately, his face hard with anger. "It would be my pleasure, Nina. And I'll do it pro bono. What they've done is despicable." Lucy jumped up, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, please, you're taking everything out of context. We were just joking around. We didn't mean." "Get out." My voice was quiet but firm. "Get out of my house right now. All of you. Take your things and leave." They left that night, Lucy still crying, Mike silent and seething, Tom skulking behind them like the coward he was. Only Drew stayed behind, holding my hand through it all. A week later, Lucy transferred back every penny she'd stolen, all $25,000. I suspect Robert's threats of legal action had something to do with it. I decided not to sue after all. Not because I forgave them, but because I wanted them out of my life completely. A lawsuit would have meant months or years of dealing with them through the courts. Instead, I went to my lawyer and had my will changed. I made it official that Lucy was completely cut out, she wouldn't get a single penny after my death. I made sure all our relatives and friends knew about it too. No one blamed me, they'd all heard the recordings. As for Tom, I couldn't bring myself to forgive him either. Some people told me I should cut him some slack, because he was only 14, but I disagreed. 14 is old enough to know right from wrong. 14 is old enough to understand that wishing death on your grandmother isn't a joke. Some of the things he said about me were worse than what came out of the adults' mouths. But Drew, my sweet Drew, turned out to be my saving grace. When she got accepted to Berkeley, I paid her tuition in full. She moved into the dorms, far away from her toxic parents, and she comes to visit me every weekend she can. We spend hours talking about her photography projects, her classes, her dreams for the future. Yesterday, I finalized my new will. Everything I own, the house, the savings, all of it, will go to Drew when I'm gone. She's the only one who showed me real love, the only one who defended me even when she thought I couldn't hear her. She's the one who deserves it. You know, it's funny. Lucy spent years scheming to get her hands on my money, and all she had to do was be a decent human being. If she'd shown me just a fraction of the genuine love that Drew did, she would have inherited everything anyway. I may have lost a daughter, but I gained something more valuable, the truth. And in Drew, I found the kind of family I always wanted, one based on real love, not greed and deceit. Fresh out of college with my business degree, I found myself back in my childhood home. I'm Anna, 22 years old, and honestly, I hadn't planned on moving back in with my parents. But here I was. The job hunt didn't take long, thankfully. Within a week, I landed a position at Davidson Marketing with a pretty decent salary and promising performance bonuses. That evening over Mom's meatloaf, I shared my good news. I figured I'd stay here for about 3 months, save up some money, and then get my own apartment. The clinking of forks against plates stopped abruptly. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their looks, the kind that always meant trouble. Moving out? Mom set down her fork. Anna, you know I can only work part-time at the library because of my back problems. Dad cleared his throat. And things aren't great at the plant. There've been rumors of layoffs. We could really use your help with the bills, Mom added softly. And you wouldn't have to pay rent here. It just makes more sense, doesn't it? I stared at my half-eaten meatloaf, feeling trapped. They had a point, sort of. And they were my parents, after all. I guess I could stay longer. Life fell into a routine after that. I went to work, came home, paid the bills, and Mom made sure dinner was always on the table. It seemed okay, manageable even. Until last weekend, when my sister Sarah showed up with her husband Mike and their kids, Emma and Lucas. The change in my parents was like someone had flipped a switch. Oh, my precious angels, Mom cooed, scooping up 4-year-old Emma while Dad swung Lucas onto his shoulders. Sarah, darling, you look wonderful. How's everything going? Tell us all about what you've been up to. I stood in the doorway, watching as my parents fawned over their eldest daughter and her perfect little family. The way they hung on her every word, asking for details about the most mundane things, how her garden was doing, what new words Lucas had learned, how her book club was going. They'd never shown that kind of interest in my life, not even when I made Dean's List or won the business school's leadership award. Anna, be a dear and put on some coffee, Mom called over her shoulder, not even looking my way as she bounced Lucas on her knee. Standing in the kitchen that day, listening to my family's laughter from the living room, I couldn't help but think back to how things had always been this way. Sarah, 7 years my senior, had always been the star of our family show, while I was relegated to the role of supporting cast. I remember sitting at this same kitchen table when I was 11, showing Mom my straight-A report card. She barely glanced at it before returning to her conversation with Sarah about college applications. That's nice, Anna, she'd said absently, waving me away. Sarah, honey, which universities are your top choices? Those years were all about Sarah's high school achievements. Every dinner conversation revolved around her grades, her extracurriculars, her college prep. I'd sit there quietly eating my peas while Mom and Dad hung on Sarah's every word about her AP classes and college tours. Everything changed even more dramatically when Sarah got accepted to Brighton University. I was 11 at the time, and I still remember that dinner conversation like it was yesterday. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, Mom had exclaimed, tears in her eyes. We'll make it work, won't we, Robert? Dad nodded solemnly. We'll take out a student loan. Our Sarah deserves the best education possible. A week after Sarah left for college, they sat me down for a different kind of talk. Anna, Dad said, his voice serious, we need to tighten our belts for a while. The loan payments and Sarah's college expenses are significant. That's when things really changed. While my classmates got new phones every year, I kept my old flip phone until it literally fell apart. When I needed new clothes, we went to thrift stores instead of the mall. Christmas gifts became practical items like socks and school supplies. But they never forgot to send Sarah money. Your sister needs to focus on her studies, Mom would say as she wrote another check. We can't let her feel stressed about money. I learned my lesson early. At 15, I joined every club and academic competition I could find. I stayed up late studying, not just for good grades, but for perfect ones. I wrote essays for scholarship competitions until my hands cramped. Because I knew that there would be no student loans for me. It paid off. I got a full scholarship to State University, and I still remember the look of relief on my parents' faces when I told them. They wouldn't have to spend a dime on my education. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated, got a job in Brighton, and quickly married Mike, her college sweetheart. Within 2 years, she had Emma, and Lucas followed shortly after. My parents were over the moon. Their perfect daughter had created a perfect family. Now, every monthly visit turned into the same routine. Sarah and Mike would show up with the kids, and before I could even say hello properly, Sarah would be planning her weekend. "Anna, you'll watch Emma and Lucas while we go shopping, right?" she'd say, not really asking. Mike and I hardly get any alone time these days. The first few times, I tried to suggest that our parents could watch them instead. "Oh, honey," Mom would say, rubbing her back. "You know it's hard for me to keep up with young children. And your father needs his rest on weekends." So here I was, spending yet another Saturday watching Frozen for the 100th time with Emma, while Lucas tried to color on my bedroom walls. Sarah and Mike were off having lunch with friends, and our parents were puttering around the garden, occasionally peeking in to ask if I needed anything, as if they were doing me a favor. I tried to console myself with the thought that it was just one weekend a month. Just one weekend of being the free, reliable babysitter while everyone else lived their lives. A year passed in this monthly rhythm of babysitting and bills. I had almost gotten used to it, almost. Then came the phone call that would turn my already complicated life completely upside down. I was doing dishes after dinner when I heard Mom's phone ring. From the kitchen, I could hear her surprised, "Sarah? Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. Tell me what happened." Through sobs, Sarah explained that Mike's company had gone bankrupt without warning. They couldn't afford their rent anymore and had no savings. Could we maybe stay with you for a while?" Sarah's voice was so loud through the phone that I could hear it clearly. "Of course you can," Mom exclaimed without a moment's hesitation. "We'll make room." My stomach dropped. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. If they're moving in, maybe this would be a good time for me to get my own apartment?" You'd think I'd suggested burning down the house. Mom looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Anna, don't be ridiculous. There's plenty of room for everyone." "But we're family," Dad said firmly. "We stick together during hard times." They arrived the following weekend with 3 cars full of belongings. I spent Saturday morning moving my things into what had been our storage room, the smallest bedroom in the house, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. My old room, which was twice the size, became the kids' nursery because the children need space to play. Emma, now 5, and 3-year-old Lucas treated the entire house like their personal playground. They ran up and down the hallways, screaming and laughing, while Sarah watched TV at full volume or had long, loud phone conversations with her friends about how difficult this transition was for her. "Emma, Lucas, keep it down," I'd call out when they burst into my room for the 10th time, scattering my work papers everywhere. "They're just playing, Anna," Sarah would say dismissively, not even looking up from her phone. "Don't be such a grouch." After work, all I wanted was to relax in my room, maybe read a book or watch something on my laptop. Instead, I got to listen to Baby Shark playing on repeat through the thin walls, punctuated by the constant thump of little feet running back and forth and Sarah's loud laughter at whatever show she was watching downstairs. Mike spent his days supposedly job hunting, but mostly I saw him sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone with a worried expression. "The job market's tough right now," he'd say whenever anyone asked. "But I'm sure something will come up soon." I lay in my tiny bed each night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the chaos that had become my home, and wondered how I'd let myself get trapped in this situation. But every time I thought about bringing up moving out again, I remembered my parents' reaction and kept quiet. The first utility bill after Sarah's family moved in hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the numbers that were almost double what I usually paid. The water bill alone had skyrocketed, not to mention electricity and heating. Looking at my bank account, I realized that my dreams of saving for my own place were quickly evaporating. That evening at dinner, I decided to bring it up. So, about the utility bills. I started, pushing my peas around the plate. They've doubled since last month. I can't keep covering all the bills by myself anymore. It's taking almost my entire salary. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. Are you seriously complaining about money right now? When Mike and I have lost everything? I'm not complaining, I just think we need to figure out a fair way to. I can't believe how selfish you're being. Sarah's voice rose. We're going through the hardest time of our lives, and all you care about is money? Sarah's right, Anna, Mom jumped in. Family helps family. That's what we do. Dad nodded solemnly. Your sister and Mike need our support right now. This isn't the time to be counting pennies. I looked down at my plate, swallowing the words I really wanted to say. Fine, never mind. A week later, Mike finally got a job at an insurance company. It paid less than his previous position, but at least it was something. I thought maybe things would start getting better. I was wrong. It's so hard being alone with the kids all day, Sarah started complaining almost immediately. Mike leaves at 8 and doesn't get back until 6. I never get a break. Then it started. Small requests at first. Anna, could you watch the kids for an hour while I run to the store? Anna, would you mind keeping an eye on them while I take a shower? Before I knew it, these small favors had snowballed into something much bigger. I'd come home from work to find Sarah already dressed up to go out. Oh good, you're home, she'd say, grabbing her purse. Mike and I are meeting friends for dinner. Emma and Lucas already had their snack, but they'll need dinner in an hour. We'll be back by 10. Weekends became my personal nightmare. Sarah and Mike would casually announce their plans on Friday evening, a shopping trip, lunch with friends, a movie date, leaving me with the kids for hours. Mom and Dad conveniently started visiting relatives more often, usually disappearing right after Sarah and Mike left. So there I'd be, weekend after weekend, trying to keep Emma from drawing on the walls while Lucas had another tantrum because I cut his sandwich the wrong way. I'd spend my Saturdays cleaning up toys, making mac and cheese, and watching endless repeats of children's movies. By Sunday night, I'd be exhausted, my house would be a mess, and I'd still need to cook dinner for everyone. One evening, after a particularly exhausting weekend of childcare, I finally worked up the courage to say something at dinner. I need to talk to you all, I said, setting down my fork. I'm really tired. This situation with the childcare isn't working for me. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean, isn't working? Are you saying you don't want to spend time with your own nephews? Mom reached over and patted Sarah's hand. Don't worry, honey. This is actually good practice for Anna. She'll need to know how to handle children when she becomes a mother herself someday. Think of it as training. And just like that, they went back to their usual dinner conversation, Sarah talking about her day, Mom and Dad hanging on her every word, Mike nodding along. I sat there, invisible once again, pushing food around my plate. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. Sarah and Mike seemed to take my complaint as a challenge, finding even more reasons to go out. They'd be waiting by the door when I got home from work, car keys in hand. We're meeting friends at that new restaurant downtown, they'd say, already halfway out the door. Kids have had their snack. Thanks, Anna. Weekends became something I dreaded. I'd wake up on Saturday mornings with a knot in my stomach, knowing I'd spend the next 2 days watching Paw Patrol and mediating sibling fights while Sarah and Mike lived their best lives. Then came a Wednesday that changed everything. I was at my desk at work, trying to focus on a marketing report despite my exhaustion, when my friend Rachel stopped by my cubicle. Hey, want to do something fun this weekend? She asked, perching on the edge of my desk. A bunch of us are going to the Pine Ridge Ski Resort. Just a quick weekend getaway, leave Saturday morning, come back Sunday night. The slopes are supposed to be perfect right now. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement. Friday evening, I was in my tiny bedroom packing my duffel bag, actually feeling happy about an upcoming weekend for once. I had just folded my warmest sweater when Sarah appeared in my doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyeing my half-packed bag. "Packing for a ski trip," I replied, rolling up my thermal socks. "Going to Pine Ridge with some friends from work." Sarah's face darkened. "You need to cancel." I looked up, startled by her tone. "What? Why would I do that?" "Because," she said, crossing her arms, "Mike and I are going to Aunt Linda's 60th birthday party in Millbrook this weekend. Mom and Dad are coming too. You need to stay here with Emma and Lucas." I couldn't help but laugh, actually laugh out loud, at the sheer audacity of it all. "You're joking, right?" I said, continuing to fold my ski pants. "You can't seriously expect me to cancel my plans because you didn't bother to tell me about yours." Sarah's face turned red. "This isn't funny, Anna. You're being completely unreasonable." "No, what's unreasonable is assuming I'll drop everything at a moment's notice to be your personal babysitter. Again." Sarah's mouth fell open. She stood there for a moment, sputtering, before turning on her heel and storming out of my room. "Mom, Dad, Mike," I could hear her shouting down the hallway. "You won't believe what Anna's doing." I kept packing, my hands shaking slightly with anger. The thundering of footsteps announced the arrival of the cavalry. My tiny room suddenly felt even smaller as Sarah, Mike, and my parents crowded in. Mom's face was already set in that disappointed expression I knew so well. "What's this about you going skiing?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "Exactly what it sounds like," I replied, zipping up my duffel bag. "I'm going to Pine Ridge Resort with my friends for the weekend." "But you can't," Sarah exclaimed. "We have Aunt Linda's party." "No, you have Aunt Linda's party," I corrected her. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face them all. Why am I just hearing about this party now? Why wasn't I included in any of the planning? Mom hesitated, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Sarah jumped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We all discussed it and decided this would work best for everyone. We go to the party, you watch the kids. It's the most logical arrangement." "You all discussed it?" I repeated slowly. "Without me? And decided what I would be doing with my weekend? How convenient." "Well, you can't exactly bring small children to a sophisticated party," Sarah sniffed. "Aunt Linda specifically said no kids." I shouldered my duffel bag. "Sounds like a you problem." "They're your kids, Sarah. Figure it out." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mike finally spoke up, frowning. "It means exactly what it sounds like. I have plans. I'm going skiing. Your children are your responsibility, not mine. If you can't bring them to the party, either don't go or hire a babysitter." "A babysitter?" Sarah screeched. "With what money?" Again, not my problem. I turned to face them all, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in months, maybe years. "Let me make this perfectly clear, I am going skiing tomorrow. I am done being your free, convenient babysitter. I'm done having my weekends hijacked, my plans ignored, and my life treated like it doesn't matter. If you need childcare, Sarah, that's your responsibility as a parent. Stop assuming I'll always be there to pick up your slack." The silence that followed was deafening. They all stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Dad seemed to be trying to disappear into the doorframe. And Mike, well, Mike just stood there with that same confused expression he'd been wearing since his company went bankrupt. The moment of shocked silence didn't last long. Sarah's face crumpled, and she burst into theatrical sobs, covering her face with her hands. Mike muttered something that sounded distinctly like "ungrateful bitch" under his breath. "How dare you?" Mom's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you. You're being completely irresponsible." "Selfish," Dad chimed in, shaking his head. "Absolutely selfish." I stood there, my duffel bag still over my shoulder, watching my family turn into a Greek chorus of accusations. The words washed over me: selfish, ungrateful, inconsiderate, immature, each one meant to cut deep, to put me back in my place. Then Mom delivered what she clearly thought would be the knockout blow: if you walk out that door tomorrow, don't bother coming back to this house. To everyone's surprise, I burst out laughing. Not a nervous giggle, but a full, genuine laugh. They all stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. "You know what's funny?" I said, wiping tears from my eyes. "I've been dreaming about moving out of this house for months. I just didn't have the courage to do it. But here you are, giving me the perfect excuse. So thank you, Mom." "Get out," Sarah shrieked, her fake sobs forgotten in her rage. "Just get out." Gladly, I pulled out my phone and dialed Rachel's number, putting it on speaker just to make a point. "Hey, Rach? Sorry to call so late, but is that offer to crash at your place still good? Not just for after skiing, but maybe for a few days?" "Of course," Rachel's cheerful voice filled the room. "I have a spare room. Want to come over now?" "That would be perfect. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I spent the next 15 minutes gathering everything I could fit in my car: clothes, important documents, personal items. They watched from various doorways as I made trips up and down the stairs, as if they couldn't quite believe I was really doing it. When I had loaded the last box, I walked into the living room where they had all gathered. "Oh, one more thing," I said, my voice steady. "Since I won't be living here anymore, I won't be paying any of the bills either. You'll need to figure out how to support yourselves." Mom's face went pale. But the utilities, the groceries." "Not my problem anymore," I said, echoing my words from earlier. I turned and walked out the front door, ignoring Mom's suddenly panicked calls behind me. The drive to Rachel's place was a blur of adrenaline and relief. My phone kept lighting up with calls and messages, angry texts from Sarah, guilt-tripping novels from Mom, stern disappointments from Dad. I ignored them all. The next morning, Rachel and I drove to Pine Ridge Resort as planned. For the first time in what felt like forever, I spent a weekend doing exactly what I wanted to do. We skied, we laughed, we had hot chocolate by the fire, and not once did I have to worry about anyone else's children or problems. When we got back Sunday night, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. With my salary no longer going to support my family, I could actually afford a decent place. By Wednesday, I had found a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in a nice area of town, just a 15-minute drive from my office. My first week in my new apartment was like learning to breathe again. Every morning, I woke up to blessed silence: no screaming children, no blaring TV, no guilt-inducing sighs from my mother. I could make coffee and drink it while it was still hot. I could spend my evenings reading or watching whatever I wanted on Netflix. The messages kept coming, though. I didn't answer the calls, but I couldn't help reading the texts. They followed a predictable pattern. "Mom, how could you abandon your family like this? We need you." "Sarah, you're so selfish. The kids keep asking where Aunt Anna is." "Dad, your mother is very upset. You need to make this right." The messages cycled between guilt trips and anger, accusations, and pleas. I read them all but responded to none. My silence seemed to drive them even crazier. They weren't used to not having power over me. After a week of this, I was sitting on my new couch when Mom's number flashed on my phone again. This time I decided to answer. "Anna, finally." Mom's voice was sharp. "I can't believe you ruined our entire weekend. Aunt Linda's party was completely disrupted because of your selfish behavior. Sarah and Mike couldn't come because you refused to watch the children, and..." "Stop." My voice was quiet but firm. "Just stop. I'm done with this, Mom. I'm done being treated like a servant in my own home. I'm done being expected to sacrifice everything, my time, my money, my life, for everyone else's convenience. I'm done being the family ATM and free babysitter while being treated like I don't matter." There was a long pause on the other end. When Mom spoke again, her voice had changed to that wheedling tone I knew so well. "Honey, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We need you. The bills this month, we're struggling without your help." "No, Mom. I'm done. Maybe someday we can have a relationship again, but it will be on equal terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips, no more treating me like a walking wallet or free childcare service. Until then, I need space to live my own life." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I went through my phone and blocked them all: Mom, Dad, Sarah, even Mike. I blocked them on social media too. It felt both terrifying and liberating, like cutting anchor lines I hadn't even realized were holding me down. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have my family back in my life. Maybe, with enough time and distance, we can build something new, something healthier, with boundaries and respect. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and well-being to meet their endless demands. I stood in my newly renovated apartment, running my hand along the freshly painted wall. Everything was perfect, from the hardwood floors to the crystal chandelier in the dining room. At 27, I'd finally created the home I'd always dreamed of, thanks to my success at Morgan & Stanley Investment and, if I'm being honest, the inheritance from my father. My name is Emma, and my story isn't exactly a happy one. You see, today I'm hosting a housewarming party, and I've made the questionable decision to invite my half-sister, Sarah, and my mother. Just thinking about it makes my stomach turn. As I arranged appetizers on silver platters in my gleaming new kitchen, memories from childhood came flooding back. The constant torment from Sarah, my half-sister, who seemed to take pleasure in destroying everything I loved. I was 7 when she was born, the product of my mother's relationship with Tom, a man who never bothered to marry her but did manage to send child support checks every month. I remember the day I got my first art set for my 12th birthday, a gift from my father. I'd barely had it for 2 days when I found Sarah, then 5, dumping paint all over my bedroom carpet and using my expensive brushes to paint the walls. When I ran crying to Mom, she just shrugged it off. "She's just a baby, Emma. She doesn't know any better." But Sarah did know better. Like the time she took scissors to my favorite sweater, the one Dad bought me for Christmas. Or when she accidentally spilled juice all over my science project the night before it was due. Each incident was met with the same response from Mom: "Don't be so dramatic, Emma." The worst part wasn't even Sarah's behavior, it was Mom's complete inability to discipline her. While I had rules and consequences, Sarah seemed to live without either. Mom was too busy enjoying the comfortable life provided by alimony from both my father and Tom to actually parent. That's why at 14, I made the decision that changed everything: I moved in with my dad. I still remember Mom's face when I told her. She wasn't upset about losing me, she was furious about losing Dad's alimony payments. We didn't speak for years after that. Living with Dad was like finally being able to breathe. He encouraged my interest in finance, helped me with my homework, and showed me what it meant to be valued. When he passed away during my college years, it felt like losing my anchor. He left me his entire fortune, which gave me the freedom to pursue my dreams, but also made Sarah's jealousy even worse. The doorbell rang, and I felt my heart rate spike. The first guests were arriving, my aunt and uncle, thankfully, not my mother and sister yet. As I opened the door, genuine warmth spread through me at their excited exclamations over the apartment. Soon the place was filling up with friends and relatives, all of them admiring the modern kitchen with its marble countertops and the elegant living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows. Everyone was having a good time, drinking wine and sharing stories. Everything was perfect. The click of those stilettos got louder, and there they were, my mother in her usual overdressed glory, and Sarah, wearing a dress that looked like it was painted on. The party had been in full swing for over an hour, with soft jazz playing in the background and my guests engaged in pleasant conversation over wine and hors d'oeuvres. Just the kind of elegant, calm gathering I'd wanted. Sarah paused in the doorway, her nose wrinkling as she surveyed the scene. "Oh my God," she announced loudly, her voice cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation. "Is this a party or a nursing home social hour?" The room went silent. My Aunt Caroline stopped mid-sentence, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. No one laughed at Sarah's joke. I felt heat rising to my cheeks, but forced myself to stay composed. Sarah strutted into the apartment she had visited many times. Now it was completely renovated but still holding those precious memories of Dad. I watched as she ran her hand along the new granite countertop in the kitchen, inspected the designer light fixtures, and peered into every room. The jealousy was written all over her face. I'd seen that expression too many times not to recognize it. Her eyes had that same gleam they'd had when Dad bought me my first car, or when he paid for my college tuition. Then she spun around, a smile spreading across her face that made my blood run cold. "This place is amazing, Emma. I've decided, I'm moving in next week." I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. But Sarah's smile didn't waver. "I'm serious," she said. "This place is way too big for just you. And honestly, you owe me. You got everything from your dad, and what did I get? Nothing." "Sarah," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level, "you're not moving in here. Ever. This is my home." Her face contorted with rage. "You selfish bitch," she screamed, causing several of my guests to jump. "You think you're so much better than everyone else, because Daddy left you all his money. You live in this fancy apartment while Mom and I barely get by." I expected my mother to step in, to calm Sarah down or at least look embarrassed by her outburst. Instead, she stepped forward, arms crossed, and fixed me with an accusing stare. "Emma, I can't believe how greedy you've become," she said, shaking her head. "Would it kill you to help your sister? To give her a place to stay? After everything our family has been through?" "Our family?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "The family where you let Sarah torture me for years while you did nothing? That family? How dare you?" my mother gasped. "Come on, Sarah, we're leaving. Clearly, your sister cares more about her fancy apartment than her own family." Sarah stormed out, nearly knocking over a vase in the process. My mother followed, pausing at the door just long enough to give me a look of pure disappointment, the same look she'd given me when I chose to live with Dad. The door slammed behind them, and the apartment fell completely silent. Then, like a collective exhale, everyone seemed to relax at once. My Aunt Caroline came over and squeezed my hand, while others started quietly discussing what had just happened. Life returned to normal after the housewarming disaster. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about Sarah's outburst and Mom's accusations. Then, about a month after the party, my boss called me into his office. "Emma, we need you to handle the Meridian contract personally," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "It's a big deal, 2 weeks in Phoenix to get everything sorted out." I nodded, already mentally preparing for the trip. Business travel was part of the job, and honestly, a couple of weeks away from the city, and any possibility of running into Sarah or Mom, sounded perfect. That evening, I sent Mom a quick message, heading to Phoenix for 2 weeks on business. Just FYI. I didn't expect much of a response, but the complete silence still stung a little. Ever since the party, she'd been giving me the cold shoulder, probably waiting for me to apologize. As if I had anything to apologize for. The 2 weeks in Phoenix were exhausting. Endless meetings, contract negotiations, and late-night document reviews. By the time I boarded my flight home, all I could think about was sinking into my comfortable couch with a glass of wine and finally relaxing in my peaceful apartment. The first sign something was wrong was the faint smell of stale alcohol and cigarettes in the hallway outside my door. My stomach clenched as I inserted my key, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found inside. It looked like a tornado had torn through my home. Empty bottles and cigarette butts littered the floor. The expensive white leather sofa was covered in what looked like wine stains and burn marks. My beautiful freshly painted walls were defaced with God knows what, food stains, drink splashes, and what looked suspiciously like intentional graffiti. My legs shaking, I moved through the destruction. The massive TV I'd just bought was smashed, shards of its screen scattered across the floor. In the kitchen, dirty dishes were piled in the sink, and something that looked like old takeout was growing mold on my marble countertops. But the worst was yet to come. When I pushed open my bedroom door, I found Sarah sprawled across my bed, still wearing her shoes, clearly passed out drunk. My pristine white bedding was stained with makeup and what looked like pizza sauce. The sight of her there, sleeping peacefully in the midst of all this destruction, made something snap inside me. I grabbed her shoulders and started shaking her. "Wake up! What the hell have you done to my home?" She swatted at me like I was an annoying fly, mumbling incoherently. "Fine." I marched to the bathroom, filled a glass with cold water, and returned to throw it directly in her face. Sarah jolted awake, sputtering and cursing. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, mascara running down her face. "Stop screaming and tell me how you got in here," I cut through Sarah's stream of curses. "And what the hell have you done to my apartment?" Sarah wiped her face with my Egyptian cotton pillowcase and had the audacity to roll her eyes. "Mom gave me the spare key," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Said I could stay here while you were gone. But this place was so boring, all fancy and perfect and completely dead. So I had some friends over." The spare key. Of course. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd given Mom that key years ago, right after Dad died, and I inherited the apartment. "Just in case of emergencies," she'd said. And now she'd handed it over to Sarah without even asking me. "Some friends over?" I gestured at the destruction around us. "You've completely trashed my home. Look at this place, the walls, the furniture, my TV." Sarah shrugged, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. "We had some parties. Got a little wild." "What's the big deal?" "You're loaded, you can just buy new stuff." "Get out." My voice was shaking. "Get out of my apartment right now." "No." She flopped back on my bed, scrolling through her phone. "I like it here. Mom said I could stay, and I'm staying." "Deal with it." I pulled out my phone and hit Mom's number on speed dial. She answered on the third ring. "Get over here. Now." My voice was ice cold. "Come see what your precious Sarah has done to my apartment." 28 minutes later, yes, I was counting, Mom walked through my front door. I watched her face as she took in the scene, the stained walls, the ruined furniture, the bottles and garbage everywhere. Her expression barely changed. "This," I said, my arm sweeping across the devastation, "is what your daughter did to my home. The home Dad left me. The home I just spent a fortune renovating." "And you gave her the key? Without even asking me?" Mom picked up an empty wine bottle, set it on a side table, and straightened a crooked picture frame. "I don't see why you're so upset," she said, her voice maddeningly calm. "So they had a few parties. You have more than enough money to fix everything. It's not like you can't afford it." I stared at her, speechless. In that moment, I finally understood something I should have realized years ago: she would always choose Sarah. No matter what Sarah did, no matter who she hurt, Mom would always defend her. Always justify her actions. Always expect me to be the one to give in, give up, give more. "Take Sarah and get out," I said through clenched teeth. "Both of you, leave my apartment right now." Mom settled herself onto my ruined sofa, brushing aside some cigarette butts. "Actually, I think this might be good for both of you. Sarah needs a place to stay, and you've got all the space. You two living together could help repair your relationship." "Repair our relationship?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She broke into my home and destroyed it." "I didn't break in," Sarah snapped, now sprawled across my armchair. "Mom gave me the key." "Stop being so dramatic." "A key she wasn't supposed to give you." I could feel my control slipping. "This is my home, mine. Dad left it to me, not to you, not to Mom. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." Sarah threw her head back and laughed. Mom joined in, both of them looking at me like I was a child making empty threats. Go ahead, Sarah taunted. Call them. What are you going to tell them? That your sister used a key to enter your apartment? That we had some parties? Boo-hoo. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Sarah's smirk faltered slightly as she realized I was actually doing it. 911, what's your emergency? I need police at 1542 Riverside Avenue, apartment 7B, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Someone's broken into my home and refuses to leave. Less than 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway, a tall man with graying hair and a younger woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. I'm Officer Martinez, this is Officer Chen, the woman said. We received a call about a break-in? I let them in, watching their eyes widen as they took in the state of my apartment. This is my home, I explained. I was away on business for 2 weeks. My mother gave my spare key to my sister without my permission, and she's been living here, throwing parties, and destroying my property. Now she refuses to leave. You stuck-up bitch. Sarah lunged toward me, but Officer Chen stepped between us. Ma'am, please calm down, she said to Sarah, who responded with a stream of profanity that would have made a sailor blush. You can't arrest me. This is my sister's fault for being a selfish, rich. The rest of her tirade was cut off as Officer Martinez began reading her rights. Sarah fought and screamed as they handcuffed her, threatening to sue everyone, calling me every name she could think of. How dare you? Mom jumped up, finally dropping her calm facade. Having your own sister arrested? You ungrateful, vile creature. I should have known you'd turn out just like your father, cold and heartless. She stormed out after the police, shouting that she was calling our family lawyer, leaving me alone in my destroyed apartment. I stood there for a long moment, surrounded by the wreckage of my beautiful home. The TV alone would cost thousands to replace. The walls would need to be completely repainted. The furniture. I walked around making notes on my phone, tallying up the damage. I could get an appraiser in here, document everything, take Sarah to court. I had more than enough evidence, and with her behavior in front of the police, no judge would side with her. But as I looked at the growing list on my phone, I realized something. I didn't want to. I didn't want to spend months or years in court battles with Sarah. I didn't want to see her face across a courtroom or hear her voice in depositions. I deleted the list and made a different call instead. 24/7 emergency locksmith, a gruff voice answered. Hi, I need all my locks changed immediately. It's an emergency. A week after the police incident, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. Emma, we need to talk, she said, her voice gentler than I'd heard it in weeks. Can we meet at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at noon? I think it's time we discussed everything that happened. I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she'd finally realized how wrong she and Sarah had been. Maybe she was ready to apologize. Okay, I agreed. I'll be there. The next day, I arrived at the cafe right on time. Mom was already there, seated at a corner table with a spread of food in front of her, the most expensive items on the menu, lobster salad, truffle pasta, and a bottle of premium wine. I just asked for water. Emma, dear, Mom said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, we need to discuss the severe psychological trauma you've inflicted on your sister. I nearly choked on my water. Excuse me? Having Sarah arrested? Do you have any idea what that's done to her? She had to spend hours at the police station. Her friends all know about it. She's absolutely devastated. Mom shook her head sadly. The only way to make this right is to apologize and pay her compensation. $25,000 should cover the emotional distress. I sat there, stunned into silence for a moment. Then the words came tumbling out. Are you serious? Sarah broke into my home, threw wild parties, destroyed thousands of dollars worth of property, and you think I should pay her? Mom waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't be so materialistic, Emma. So she had a few parties? Broke a few things? You're rich, you can easily replace everything. The emotional damage you've caused her, though? That's not so easily fixed. She walked toward the door, then turned back with a smile that made my blood boil. Oh, and be a dear and take care of the bill. I know how much you enjoy showing off your wealth. I watched her leave, then looked at the table covered in expensive dishes she'd ordered. The waiter appeared with the check, and I could see Mom had even ordered several desserts to go. The bill was over $200 for a lunch she'd barely touched. I walked into my partially repaired apartment, kicked off my shoes, and sat down at my desk. The cafe encounter kept replaying in my mind, Mom's casual demand for $25,000, her complete dismissal of the damage Sarah had caused, the way she'd stuck me with the bill without a second thought. Just like she'd been doing for years. Opening my laptop, I pulled up my banking records. There it was, in black and white, $2,000 transferred to her account every month since Dad died. Plus all the utility bills I paid, the property taxes on her house, the endless stream of emergency expenses she always needed help with. It had started after Dad's funeral. Mom had shown up at my apartment, crying about how hard things were financially, how she couldn't make ends meet. I'm too old to find a job now, she'd said. And with Sarah still in school. I'd felt guilty about all the years we hadn't spoken, about moving out to live with Dad. So I'd agreed to help. That help had turned into an endless drain. New appliances, when hers mysteriously broke down. Designer clothes, because she needed to maintain appearances. Home repairs that somehow always cost thousands. And through it all, she'd never once looked for work, never tried to become self-sufficient. Why would she? She had me, her personal ATM. I opened a new email and started typing. Mom. After today's conversation, I've made an important decision. Effective immediately, I will no longer be sending you monthly payments or covering any of your bills. The financial support I provided was always meant to be temporary, not a permanent arrangement. It was my choice to help you, not my obligation. I've spent years trying to make up for choosing to live with Dad, trying to prove I was a good daughter by funding your lifestyle. That ends now. It's time for both you and Sarah to support yourselves. Do not contact me about money again. Emma. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I went into my bill pay account and canceled all the automatic payments to her utility companies. The phone rang less than 15 minutes after I sent the email. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. How dare you? Mom's voice was shrill. I am your mother. You have an obligation to take care of me. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By cutting me off without warning? You haven't done anything for me, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. You've taken, and when I needed you to be a mother, when Sarah was destroying my home, when she was making my life miserable, you always chose her. Always demanded more from me while letting her do whatever she wanted. I raised you. I fed you. No, Dad raised me. From the time I was 14, he was the one who took care of me. You just lived off his alimony. And when that stopped, you found someone else to support you. Now it's time for you and Sarah to support yourselves. You ungrateful little. I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again, but I didn't answer. Instead, I blocked her number. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The messages started flooding in almost immediately after I blocked their phone numbers. First through WhatsApp, then Facebook, then Instagram, and even LinkedIn. Each one more desperate and angry than the last. You're destroying this family, Mom wrote. Hope you're happy being rich and alone, Sarah messaged. Only a heartless person would abandon their mother and sister. You'll regret this when you need us. I blocked them on every platform, one by one, but they kept finding new ways to reach me. They even started messaging my friends, telling elaborate stories about how I'd abandoned them to poverty while living in luxury. I wasn't taking any chances with my security. I spoke with Frank, our building's concierge, explaining the situation. My mother and sister aren't allowed up under any circumstances, I told him. Even if they say it's an emergency. The very next evening, when I came home from work, Frank stopped me. "Ms. Thompson, your mother and sister were here about an hour ago. They tried to convince me they had your permission to go up. When I refused, your sister got quite vocal. I had to threaten to call security before they left. I thanked him and increased his Christmas bonus on the spot." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into renovating my apartment again. New furniture, fresh paint, replaced TV. I erased every trace of Sarah's destruction, every reminder of that nightmare. But something felt different now. This place that had once been my sanctuary, my connection to Dad, felt tainted. Through the family grapevine, I heard stories. Mom and Sarah were struggling financially, bouncing from relative to relative, asking for loans they'd never repay. They were telling everyone who would listen about how I'd cruelly cut them off, conveniently leaving out the part about breaking into my home or demanding compensation for being arrested. I ran into Mom a few times in the neighborhood. It was inevitable, given how close she lived. She'd try to corner me, alternating between angry demands and tearful pleas. "Emma, please, can we just talk? We're family." I'd walk past without a word, my heels clicking on the pavement, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. Last week, I found myself looking at real estate listings. Modern condos in different neighborhoods, secure buildings with strict access policies. Places where I could truly start fresh, without the constant anxiety of running into them or wondering if they'd try to break in again. Dad's apartment had been my home for so long. It held so many memories, homework sessions at the kitchen table, Sunday morning pancakes, long talks about my future. But maybe it was time to let it go. I bookmarked a listing for a penthouse in a new development across town. The building had 24-hour security, private elevator access, and a stunning view of the city. More importantly, it represented something I'd been seeking my whole life without realizing it: true independence. A clean slate. Tomorrow, I'm going to call the realtor. It's time for a fresh start, one that's truly my own. My name's Robin, and I've always been the black sheep in my family. Since I was little, all I wanted to do was draw. I'd spend hours creating characters in my sketchbook: superheroes, animals, magical creatures, you name it. After high school, while everyone was heading off to college, I made what my family called the biggest mistake of my life. Instead of university, I enrolled in 3D modeling courses. I still remember my mom's face when I told her. She just stood there in our kitchen, dish towel in hand, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "What do you mean you're not going to college?" she asked, her voice rising. "Your sister Jessica went to college. She has a real career now." "Yeah, Jessica. My perfect older sister, who did everything right according to our parents. College degree, office job, married to Tom right after graduation. The whole package." I tried explaining to them about YouTube, about how animators could make a living creating content. I'd gotten pretty good with my tablet and animation software, and I really thought I could make it work. "YouTube?" Dad scoffed one evening during dinner. "That's not a real job, Robin. You're going to live with us forever at this rate." The worst part was, at first, they were kind of right. My early animations barely got any views. I was making pocket change, if that. Every time Jessica and Tom came over for Sunday dinner, she'd make sure to bring it up. "Oh my God, Robin," she said one night, scrolling through her phone with this smirk on her face. "Have you seen the comments on your latest video? These people are savage." Tom leaned over to look at her screen. "Well, they really are ripping it apart. Maybe animation isn't your thing, Robin." I saw how much they enjoyed it, Jessica's little smirk, the way she'd catch Mom's eye and they'd share this knowing look. Even Dad would shake his head and mutter something about wasting time on cartoons. "When are you going to find a normal job?" Mom would ask at least once a week. You can't keep living in your little fantasy world forever. But here's the thing about me, I'm stubborn. Instead of giving up, I threw myself into improving. I studied successful channels, analyzed what worked and what didn't. I completely revamped my animation style, made my characters more dynamic, added better storytelling. The change didn't happen overnight. But slowly, steadily, things started picking up. 10 subscribers became 100. 100 became 1,000. Every time I hit a milestone, Jessica would roll her eyes and change the subject to her latest promotion or something. 3 years flew by like a time-lapse animation. My channel had grown beyond anything I could have imagined when I first started. The money was rolling in steadily now: sponsorship deals, merchandise, animation contracts. Every month, my bank account grew bigger, but I kept quiet about it. Let them think I was still struggling. I decided to drop the bomb during one of our regular family dinners. Jessica and Tom were there, as usual. Mom had made her signature lasagna, and everyone was picking at their food while discussing Jessica's latest work promotion. "I have an announcement," I said, setting down my fork. "I'm moving out next week. I've rented an apartment." The silence that followed was beautiful. Jessica choked a bit on her wine. "You what?" she sputtered, exchanging looks with Tom. "Where did you get money for an apartment?" "Dad, are you paying for this?" I took a slow sip of water, enjoying the moment. "Actually, my channel is doing quite well. Well enough that I could rent a house if I wanted to." Mom dropped her fork. The clatter against the plate was almost as loud as the silence that followed. "How much money are we talking about here?" Jessica demanded, her voice sharp. "There's no way you're making that much from YouTube." I just smiled and shrugged. "Enough." They peppered me with questions all through dinner, trying to get me to reveal exact numbers, but I kept my mouth shut. The next morning, I moved into my new apartment. It wasn't huge, but it was mine, well, rented, but still mine. No more judgmental looks over breakfast, no more snide comments about my little hobby. I threw myself into work even harder after that. My setup in the new apartment was perfect, a dedicated animation studio with all the equipment I needed. My style evolved, my storytelling got better, and my subscriber count kept climbing. The money kept flowing in, and for the first time in my life, I could shop wherever I wanted. I remember the first time I showed up at my parents' house for dinner wearing designer jeans and carrying a real leather bag. Jessica's eyes nearly popped out of her head. She kept staring at my purse throughout dinner, probably trying to figure out if it was real. "Is that Gucci?" she finally asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. "Maybe," I replied, hiding my smile behind my water glass. That's when things started to shift. It began with small things at first. Dad mentioning how the water bill was higher than usual. Mom casually bringing up how the refrigerator was making strange noises and might need replacing. "The property taxes went up this year," Dad said one evening, sliding into what I now recognize as his asking for money voice. "It's getting harder to keep up with all the bills." I wrote them a check right there at the dinner table. Why not? I could afford it. The look of relief on their faces made me feel good, like I was finally proving my worth to them. Pretty soon, it became a regular thing. The utilities needed paying? I'd handle it. The roof needed repairs? No problem. New appliances? Just tell me where to send the money. I was making more than enough to cover their expenses and still save for my own place. Life has a funny way of flipping the script on people. While my animation career was taking off, Jessica's perfect life was starting to show some cracks. She got pregnant with her first baby, and suddenly Tom's salary wasn't looking so impressive anymore. I first noticed something was wrong during a family dinner. Jessica wasn't wearing any of her usual expensive jewelry, and her designer clothes had been replaced with department store brands. She barely touched her food, just pushed it around her plate while Tom talked about rising rent prices. "Everything's so expensive now," Jessica said, bouncing her fussy baby on her knee. Diapers, formula, clothes, they grow out of everything so fast. I caught her looking at my watch, a little splurge I'd bought myself to celebrate hitting 5 million subscribers. The old Jessica would have made some snarky comment about it. Instead, she just looked tired. That night, I logged into my banking app and set up a monthly transfer to her account. Not a huge amount, but enough to take the edge off. I didn't tell her it was from me at first, but she figured it out pretty quickly. "You don't have to do this," she said when she called me about it, trying to sound proud, but I could hear the relief in her voice. "I want to," I replied. "That's what sisters are for, right?" When I turned 26, I decided it was time to level up my business. Working from home was fine when it was just me, but I had bigger plans. I rented out an entire floor in an office building downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, the works. Then I started hiring other artists, talented people who shared my vision for creating amazing content. "You have your own company now?" Mom asked when I told them about it. "Like, a real office with employees and everything?" "Yeah," I smiled. "A whole team of animators. We're working on some really exciting projects." My success kept snowballing. I bought myself a beautiful apartment in one of those fancy high-rises with a doorman and everything. Then came the new car, nothing too flashy, but definitely nicer than anything I'd ever dreamed of owning before. I was even starting to look at houses, thinking maybe it was time for something bigger. Then Jessica announced she was pregnant again. She tried to sound excited when she told us over dinner, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Tom had lost his job a month earlier and was doing contract work that barely covered their existing bills. "We might have to move to a smaller apartment," Jessica said quietly after dinner, while we were doing the dishes. "The landlord's raising the rent again, and with another baby coming." I didn't even hesitate. "Don't worry about the rent. I'll cover it." And just like that, I became responsible for my sister's rent. The same sister who used to mock my little cartoons now lived in an apartment paid for by those very cartoons. She stopped making snide comments about my career choices after that. Amazing how money can change people's perspectives. Our Saturday family dinners had become a regular thing again. Every weekend, I'd drive over to my parents' house, where Jessica, Tom, and their kids would already be waiting. The food was always good, the kids were cute, and everything seemed perfect on the surface. But there was a new pattern I couldn't help noticing. "The washing machine's making that weird noise again," Mom would say, carefully watching my reaction over her coffee cup. "Tommy's growing so fast," Jessica would add. "He needs a whole new wardrobe for school, and with the baby." It was always something. A broken appliance, school supplies, medical bills, house repairs. The hints weren't even subtle anymore. "The property taxes have gone up again," Dad mentioned one Saturday, pushing his mashed potatoes around his plate. "And the roof really needs work before winter." I always said yes. Why wouldn't I? My latest merchandising deal alone could cover their expenses for a year. Besides, it felt good to be able to help, to see their relief when I'd write another check or make another transfer. One night, while watching them all around the dinner table, Mom serving dessert, Dad telling one of his old jokes, Jessica's kids making a mess with their ice cream, I had an idea. "How about a family vacation?" I suggested. 2 weeks in Hawaii? You should have seen their faces. Mom actually dropped the serving spoon. "Hawaii?" Jessica whispered, like she was afraid saying it too loud would make the offer disappear. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. All expenses paid. The whole family." The trip was amazing. Seeing my parents experience their first real luxury vacation, watching Jessica's kids build their first sandcastle, even Tom seemed to relax for the first time in years. Mom cried when we had to leave. But I had an even bigger surprise planned. Mom and Dad's 35th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I wanted to do something special. They'd been driving the same old minivan for over a decade, and it was definitely showing its age. I went all out for the anniversary party. Catered food from their favorite restaurant, new outfits for both of them, decorations, everything. The house was packed with relatives and old friends, all celebrating their milestone. When it came time for gifts, I handed them a small box with a bow on it. Mom opened it, saw the car keys, and looked confused for a moment. "What's this?" she asked. "Look out the window," I told them. There it was, parked in the driveway, a brand new SUV with a big red bow on top. Not the most expensive car out there, but perfect for them, safe, comfortable, plenty of room for groceries and grandkids. They hugged me, tight enough to hurt a little. "We're so proud of you," Mom whispered in my ear. So proud. Looking back now, I should have noticed something off in their expressions when they said that. But I was too happy in the moment, too pleased with being able to give back to my family. Too blind to see what was really going on. It was a peaceful Saturday morning, 2 weeks after the anniversary celebration. Mom and Dad had gone shopping in their new car, excited to take it for a spin. I stayed behind at the house, wanting some quiet time in my childhood home. I wandered into Dad's office, where I used to spend hours doing homework at his big oak desk. Mom had been talking about organizing all the old family photos and documents piled up in the corner, and I figured I'd help out while I had some free time. It was like a trip down memory lane. Report cards from elementary school, Jessica's college acceptance letters, old family vacation photos, birthday cards we'd made as kids. I smiled at a particularly terrible drawing I'd done of our family when I was 4, stick figures with wildly disproportionate heads. That's when I noticed the manila envelope. It stood out among the yellowed papers and worn photo albums, crisp, new, official looking. It wasn't weathered like the other documents, the paper was still stiff, the edges sharp. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside was a legal document, dated just days after the anniversary party. The heading read, "Last Will and Testament." My hand started shaking as I read through it, the legal jargon swimming before my eyes until I found the important part. "All assets and property to be transferred to our daughter, Jessica Martin." I read it again. My name wasn't there. Not anywhere. Everything, the house I'd been helping pay for, the car I'd just given them, all of it, was going to Jessica. The paper trembled in my hands. I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't about the money or the property, God knows I had enough of my own. It was what it meant. All those smiles, the hugs, the "we're so proud of you," had it all been an act? Time seemed to stop until I heard it, the sound of car doors slamming, followed by voices and footsteps approaching the house. The front door opened, and I heard Mom laughing about something. "Robin," she called out. "We're back. Where are you?" I stood up slowly, still holding the envelope, and walked to the living room. They were carrying shopping bags, both smiling and chatting about their trip, until they saw me. Until they saw what I was holding. The bags dropped to the floor. Mom's face went white as paper. Dad looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Would someone like to explain this?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the storm raging inside me. I held up the envelope, watching their faces. Mom recovered first. "Well, we were going to tell you." "When?" I asked. "Before or after you signed over everything to Jessica?" Dad stepped forward, trying to play peacemaker. "Now, Robin, it's not what you think." "Really?" I cut him off. "Because it looks pretty clear to me." That's when Mom's whole demeanor changed. Her face hardened, and she went on the attack. "How dare you go through our private papers," she shouted, her voice rising to that shrill pitch I remembered from childhood scoldings. "Who do you think you are, snooping through your father's office?" I let out a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Private papers? In the house that I've been paying for? The house whose utilities I cover every month. Those private papers?" Dad cleared his throat. "Robin, be reasonable. You're already successful. You have your own money, your own apartment. Jessica, she needs this more than you do." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "That's not the point, Dad. If you wanted to leave everything to Jessica, fine. But you could have talked to me about it. Instead, you went behind my back, right after I gave you a car, right after telling me how proud you were of me. We don't have to explain ourselves to you, Mom burst out. We're your parents. We can do what we want with our property. Your property? I repeated. The property I've been maintaining? The bills I've been paying? That property? Give me that envelope, Mom demanded, holding out her hand. And I think you should leave. And don't come back until you learn some respect. I stood there for a moment, looking at these people who I thought I knew. My mother, red-faced and angry. My father, unable to meet my eyes. I placed the envelope carefully on the coffee table. Keep it, I said quietly. Keep all of it. I walked out without another word, got in my car, and drove home to my apartment. I was just stepping out of a hot shower, trying to process everything that had happened, when my phone rang. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. How dare you, she screamed before I could even say hello. How dare you try to steal my inheritance? You're already rich. Why do you need Mom and Dad's house too? God, you're so greedy. I don't want the house, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I just... Liar, you've always been jealous of me. Well, guess what? Mom and Dad know what's best, and they chose me. Jessica, I'm literally paying your rent right now. Oh, here we go, she shrieked. Always throwing your money in everyone's face. That's all you care about, isn't it? Money, money, money. I felt a laugh bubbling up, a slightly hysterical one. I care about money? Me? That's rich, coming from you. You think you're so much better than everyone else just because. I hung up. Just hit the red button mid-rant and tossed my phone onto the couch. Then I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights, letting the quiet of my apartment wash over me. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to take deep breaths. In, out, in, out. I threw myself into work after that day. My team was amazing, they didn't ask questions about my mood, just helped me channel everything into our newest project. We were creating something special, a series that would push our animation skills to the limit. Then Friday afternoon, my phone lit up with Mom's name. Robin? Her voice was softer than it had been during our last encounter. We need to have a family dinner tomorrow. A serious conversation. When I pulled up to the house Saturday evening, I saw Jessica's car already parked in the driveway. Great. The whole gang was indeed there, Mom, Dad, Jessica, and Tom, all seated around the dining room table like some kind of family tribunal. Mom had made pot roast, my favorite. The smell filled the house, but nobody was eating. They all watched as I took my seat, the silence heavy and uncomfortable. Dad cleared his throat. Robin, we've made a decision. I waited, looking at their faces one by one. Jessica couldn't hide her smirk. We're transferring the house to Jessica's name, Mom announced. Right away. We've already talked to our lawyer. Before I could respond, Jessica leaned forward, her expression sickeningly sweet. Just to make sure you can't contest the will later, you understand. We have to protect our family's interests. Protect our family's interests, I repeated slowly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I looked around the table again, really looked. At Mom, who'd cried tears of joy when I gave them the car. At Dad, who'd hugged me and said he was proud of me. At Jessica, who lived in an apartment I paid for. At Tom, who hadn't been able to provide for his family and let me pick up the slack. And suddenly, everything became crystal clear. You know what I just realized? I said, pushing my chair back and standing up. I've been such an idiot. This whole time, I thought I was helping my family. But I wasn't helping family, I was feeding an ATM machine. What are you talking about? Mom demanded. I'm talking about how you all see me. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, just as a convenient source of money. Well, guess what? The ATM is closed. Robin, Dad started, but I cut him off. Starting today, I'm done. No more paying your bills. No more covering your rent, Jessica. No more gifts, no more transfers, nothing. You want to play games with inheritance? Fine. But you can do it with your own money. Jessica's face went from smug to panicked in an instant. You can't do that. Watch me. Robin, be reasonable, Mom pleaded, her voice rising. We're your family. No, I said, my voice steady. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't smile to your face while stabbing you in the back. Family doesn't take and then treat you like this. They all started yelling at once, Mom crying, Dad calling my name, Jessica screaming about how selfish I was, Tom trying to talk about the kids. Their voices followed me down the hallway, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing for days after that dinner. Texts, calls, voicemails, all of them ranging from guilt-tripping to outright hostile. I didn't respond to any of them. Then Mom took it to Facebook. I knew it was coming. She'd always been the type to air family drama online when she couldn't get her way in person. I never thought my own daughter would be so selfish, her post began. After everything we've done for her, she's abandoned her family in our time of need. A child's duty is to help their parents, but some children only think of themselves. I read it with a sort of detached amusement. The comments started rolling in immediately, but not quite the way Mom expected. Isn't this the daughter who's been paying all your bills? One of our cousins wrote. Wait, the one who bought you a new car for your anniversary, added an aunt. The same one who paid for your Hawaii vacation, someone else chimed in. Jessica jumped into the comments, calling me an evil, envious thing who can't stand to see others happy. Mom liked her comment, of course. That was the final straw. I picked up my phone and called the insurance company that handled the car I'd given my parents. The car that was still registered in my name. Hi, I need to report my car for repossession, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Yes, I have the paperwork right here. They were efficient, I'll give them that. The tow truck arrived at my parents' house early the next morning. I got the confirmation text just as I was starting my workday. That's when my phone really exploded. How dare you take our car? You evil witch, we trusted you. This is theft. We'll call the police. I read through their messages with a strange sense of calm. Then I opened my contacts and started blocking numbers. One by one, I cut off every avenue they had to reach me. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to any of them since. I hear things through the family grapevine sometimes, Mom and Dad struggling to pay their bills, Jessica and Tom having to downsize to a smaller apartment. But it's not my problem anymore. Instead, I've been focusing on myself. Every penny I used to spend on them now goes into savings for my dream house. I'm looking at properties with big yards and plenty of space for a home animation studio. Maybe I'll get a dog. I've always wanted one, but never had the time or energy while dealing with my family's drama. My YouTube channel is doing better than ever. Turns out it's amazing how much creative energy you have when you're not constantly managing other people's crises. My team and I just hit 10 million subscribers, and we're expanding into new projects I never would have dreamed possible before. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Then I remember finding that will, seeing the truth about how they saw me laid out in black and white. I think about all the times they laughed at my dreams, only to turn around and demand the fruits of those same dreams. Some people might call me cold for cutting off my family. But here's the thing, they stopped being family long before I stopped sending money. They just didn't bother to tell me. I had to find that out for myself, buried in a manila envelope in my father's office.